Turn on. Okay, so welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to our live stream development meeting series. I believe this is number 30, meeting 30, so that's pretty good. Quite the track record on average, every couple weeks. We kind of pool all of our thoughts together of whatever things have come out of Portal Mountain for the couple weeks. And we go over them, we discuss, we try to advance our development of the model, and of course, as always, we appreciate any kind of feedback, chat, whatever, even after the fact, all that kind of stuff. So I'm going to continue on here, and good, YouTube is happy, just got to set up the stream here. So this week we are discussing the Zeitgeist.
Continuing
discussion, yep. We're going to go over where faith fails. This is also tying into
why it's important,
the spectrum of stupidity and all that kind of stuff, which we're carrying on.
In its exposition as well, yeah.
Yeah.
Because a lot of it will tie back into the cognitive discrepancy window, and what we'll see there is the lining up of the stupidity spectrum with the cognitive window itself, and creating a seemingly solid, impenetrable, self-perpetuating structure.
Right.
So we're going to get into that and how that
and of course how this is
runs.
relevant to the times that we find ourselves in, where people seem to be under mass hypnosis, coming from many different potential sides. So it's not, we're not trying to point on, this side is bad, that side is bad, just that everybody tends to be captivated by these narratives.
Let me just clarify something, because the words mass hypnosis tend to not resonate all too well with people. Not that stupidity will, but
yeah, we don't have a term yet for this.
No. We have actually. It's the entire conversation with regards to the dream versus lucidity is in fact about that. So if we were to just qualify this mass hypnosis as the waking dream, from the waking dream perspective, it becomes clear what we mean there. It's not that it's anybody's fault that they are in this situation, so much that there is no knowledge out there that this isn't a proper self alignment with the situation itself. So mass hypnosis does not speak to anybody being dumb. It's not something that's obvious that you should have recognized long ago, and how dare you to be this quote-unquote stupid again. Much like our discussion on stupidity, it does not involve a blame on missing the obvious, because one of the things that we're trying to point out is how non-obvious it actually all is. But part of the reason is because of the active obfuscation that is part and parcel with the market machine.
Right. So throughout this series, we've been describing, and people who study history can get a sense of the long process of commodification of all life that has gone on through what we could call civilization. We kind of qualify it as breakaway civilization, because it's not really in the interest of any one person or individual. It's kind of like your mind has been sort of captured in a way to outside processes that don't really
reflect you.
They don't come back and benefit you necessarily.
They don't reflect you
any more than is bare minimum needed to keep you alive.
Yeah, basically. In fact, you could say that you're asked to reflect the alien system more than it is than it cares to reflect what you need.
Right.
And in fact, it will get rid of you as the need arises.
Right. Yeah, right. So it's kind of a cold, heartless system. And I think, or a collection of systems, and I think people can maybe resonate with that, because I think we are at a point in history where things have become so, to such an extreme, the commodification, that
Well,
it just feels cold, barren, alienating. We
I'll
feel
give you an
we feel
example.
atomized. We feel like there's no real possibility of community, of sense of connection with each other, with people right in front of us. It's all about the system.
I'll give you an idea. Most people now experience nature, history, adventure, anything to do with what used to be life through a video game. Myself included. Like I love video games to an extent, especially the really well-made ones.
Right.
But think about what's happening is that people's experience of a tree, of grass, of being outdoors is relegated to a controller and a screen. If that doesn't explain the disconnection that the system provides from life itself, I don't know what does. This is the most extreme
Right.
example of that.
Yeah, so you have kids growing up in the city, and they literally haven't been out to a forest yet, and they're playing a video game, a hunting game.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that goes to illustrate just how the mind itself really creates these virtual realities for us.
Again, look, let's back up a little bit. I'm a video game player. You're a video game player. We're not railing on
Right.
on that. It's something we grew up with.
Yeah. So that I hope is and has been a common theme, is that our stance is not in opposition of anything. We're not in condemnation of anything. We're trying to empower and inform ourselves through these explorations, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's it. And with more power, empowerment, we have ability to do something about the world around us, which we all feel, I think most of us feel kind of vaguely anxious and maybe even angry about
All right.
things, and we feel motivated to do something about it.
Speaking of feelings, let's start this. Actually, let's start the topic. The feeling why I'm using that is because you had a great example recently from your Facebook conversation,
Mm-hmm.
and that illustrates what the problem, as we keep defining it, looks like on the ground, and the personal level. What kind of events are we speaking to? And so a conflict arose due to information bias being rampant on the internet. Of course, the wedge issue is COVID and what to do about it. So regardless of stances, the point was made that this conversation, it can barely even be had because of the fact that people have already relegated themselves into particular camps, and they are wedged. They're wedged from the get-go against each other, in that one side takes a sound bite from whichever source it is, and it must mean the following part of this narrative, or it has to be part of that narrative in its own way. So either they're lying, either the government is only lying, or either the government is only helping, and there is no and a discussion about, well, how did we get into a position where we have to be told by this abstract monstrosity out there what to do with ourselves. And so everybody with an opinion on this already finds themselves pitted against the other side, regardless of actual human-to-human interaction
and context.
Yeah, the entire thing, the entire story behind that interaction is already pre-written in some systemic format, and everybody is just regurgitating the same statements over and over and over, pitting themselves against each other.
I think you've already brought up potentially a whole other issue, which is mass media dissemination of narratives, which ties into this phenomenon where, and we were talking earlier, all throughout history you've had
that as a consequence of technology.
You've had these always wedge issues, dividing groups into this camp and that camp, and it's kind of like even though we know we think individually, we kind of get swept up and we feel like we feel righteous for one side or the other because we feel our own nuanced opinions aren't as important as the wedge issues and the wedge sound bites, which have to be pushed as a team, so to speak, right?
Yeah.
And the mass media plays right into that.
So before mass media was a thing, this sort of thing was done through the church, basically, right? Essentially, any place where information gets disseminated,
disseminated, and decimated
as a consequence.
The truth.
Well, no, information is decimated upon reading and writing. Even even in memories, even that's how memory works anyway. Besides the point.
Chunking and whatnot.
My point there is that every time there's been a civilization, the meeting space was under tight control. Church, then
right.
And then following that, the media.
And what would be allowed to be said, or you could easily be outcasted.
Right.
Just kicked out of the building, not allowed back in, and then you're not part of the movement anymore.
Right, and that speaks to the exclusion being the default the situation, why the dashboard is thought of the way it had been, as it's trying to resolve this particular circumstance as well.
Right,
But that's besides the point.
Side topic, yeah.
So
yeah. So I just wanted to kind of give as we're in the introduction here, you could say, and so I just wanted to kind of bring up that people are feeling like that something needs to be done, and this gets into the whole zeitgeist discussion and the soul discussion.
Yeah.
In this whole process of commodification of life, we've been sort of hollowing out our inner processes and becoming more and more so-called helpless to do things about any of this.
So,
and that's what causes that feeling of that you can't do anything about it.
Right.
But there's something missing, and you just strive for it anyways.
And yes, last discussion we sort of dove into a subject of faith, why faith is important, and what it looks like from our perspective.
The faith bootstrap.
Right. So now let's tie this back into what the fuck we're talking about in the particulars of the zeitgeist being building, and what does lack of faith look like in a more practical sense. And this is kind of why I would like to start with this diagram here, as it piggybacks on the concept of faith, given a soundbite, space in the moment, to see how feedback is to witness the feedback being produced, and being able to observe that.
Now, just a note, we have these diagrams are all available at Portal Mountain, portalmounta.in. The third link down is like to all the charts and diagrams. You can find these, so look for the one that looks like this shape in case you can't read any of that. We have soundbite here, background, foreground, empathetic context, sympathetic self-reference, self-narrative, memeplex, dysmorphism, affect.
Yeah.
And this is the moment chart, we call that. In every moment that goes past is like
so
as your narrative through time, as you experience it, it goes through in sort
moment
of chunks,
moment by moment.
It's a kind of a small chunk of something happening.
It's the smallest discernible piece of change you can think of.
Right.
From one moment to the next, something has had to change for it to be a next moment. So that's the concept there.
Right.
And if you noticed in our discussion of the faith bootstrap, we said something along the lines of given space in the moment. Well, this is the diagram of this moment. So if you were to take the faith bootstrap on faith, this is another part of the taking on that faith bootstrap and seeing, oh, well, what does this moment is? So this is so now we're going to be describing this moment and how it works with or without faith. Okay? in the whole idea is that each moment is happening in some context, right? So not only do you have the moment, but you have everything that surrounds this moment to make that moment it, and the outflow of that moment into the future. So the past and future are linked by the moment, if you will. This is all kind of metaphorical. We're not talking physics, so please don't get too bunched up over this. The point is that we're trying to show a cycle of how one moment leads to the next moment, leads to the next moment, leads to the next moment, perpetually. And what we're seeing is that in the beginning of each moment, this is what the diagram is trying to show, is we've divided it into a background and a foreground. The background consists of the accepted reality as it is, and as things are moving. The foreground is the current event. So it's like the background being this room, the foreground being me speaking. Or, if you take peripheral vision and the focused vision, it's the same difference. Right, so both are composed of mimetics. They're composed of sound bites. A sound bite is a meme that already has a pre-designated meaning within the whole background, right? And one of those memes of the background is the foreground that focuses everything together into the next phase, if you will. So how does that next phase come about? Well, the moment is recognized as your self-reference to where the situation is happening versus what should be happening given that circumstance, and that movement from what is to what should is a movement from outside to the inside, where you're bringing the situation extrinsic to you. Like, you don't think that a situation is correct in some way, you perform an action to correct it, thereby reintegrating everything back into a single focus point of narrative.
So where's the what should be box?
The what should be box,
over.
It comes from the background. It's the empathetic context. So empathetic context meaning the things that you believe to be correct. So if you're given the object in your across your vision, the empathetic context will tell you this is an apple, or this is a ball, this is a this, this is a that, because that comes from you. You are projecting that recognition onto whatever's happening out there. And so now out there becomes in here, and it's part of your entire self-narrative.
Right. So by the empathy in this way, normally people think of empathy as deeply feelings of connection with somebody else or something like that. In this case, we're talking about
internalization.
The deep feeling of connection, of correctness of the world, of what you're seeing.
What the senses present to you versus the ongoing story in your head.
So in other words, it doesn't cause a pain when you're empathizing with something that you see it being as it should be, as you think it should be. It's not painful. It's a feeling of self.
In fact, the empathetic context could result in a pain response, simply because what you're recognizing, the final situation, once you've internalized what's happening and you don't like the meaning of it, right? It becomes a pained response. It's when you like the meaning of it where it becomes a pleasurable response. So if things are going correctly, you become relaxed, less anxious, right? Everything is integrating smoothly. When you don't like what's happening, you start to get angry at it. You start to try to change the story a different way. And if it keeps happening a certain way, and your empathetic responses are not lining up with it, it's going to continue to punish you throughout. And so that's the biggest takeaway from this diagram, in that the response is a mechanical one. And
we're seeing a natural cycle going forward.
Yeah, what drives whether it's a pleasure or a pain response specifically is the sound bites feeding the background, and whether they're correlating isomorphically or dysmorphically to the sound bites coming in through the foreground. And so And so, with a lack of faith, aka not recognizing that there is this moment that we've bootstrapped into the explanation,
and we've talked about this before.
Not seeing this, you're stuck in whatever sound bites. You'd be stuck in whatever sound
content. We're stuck in the content itself of what this moment chart is producing.
And so the narrative keeps going, and you are swept with it without being there.
So, and I just wanted to say that if the soundbite structure that you're taking as a background is of this chart of this thing happening moment to moment, it's always going to feel okay or good or whatever. It's going to feel coherent,
right?
Because you're able to see, okay,
true.
I can see that yes, I just went from another moment to another moment. Even though bad things are maybe content may be bad, you're stepping back and saying, okay, well, I'm seeing this is happening. I have a good model for it, and it's true.
And this is the difference between the faith bootstrap and the lack thereof, is the taking of this soundbite as part of the stream of sound bites and seeing how it interacts with them. And without the secondary artificial soundbite, the content is self-driving, and we've referred to this before as a death cycle because it doesn't have anything outside of itself to refer, and so it just keeps spinning and spinning and spinning in the content.
Right.
And you as a living being
so
are processing this content,
the content
not
is
being
driving
alive.
the content itself is driving the whole cycle, and this content could be a mass narrative of whatever provided by mainstream media, whatever keeps you spun up in this thing. And the only way out
is to recognize the moment,
is to see that this is what's happening.
Right.
There's no other way that feels good. You'll simply, you can get caught up in another narrative complex.
Right, we'll get
of the other side. Like you can get red pilled, quote unquote, and suddenly switch from one camp to another.
But the content will still self-perpetuate, and nothing would have fundamentally have changed.
Right.
Which is what we've like Darren Allen have been calling opposites.
Right.
And so I'd like to get into that a bit more.
Pardon?
No, never mind.
And don't mind our casualness. Cheers.
Yeah. So the basic premise, to continue the faith discussion, the basic premise is that we've already introduced the fact that there is a moment to begin with, and now we're saying, okay, this is an extension of that faith. This is what the moment looks like. And again, if you were to utilize faith, you would take this model and see how feedback is produced through it and observe that, and that's the truth value that is going to be inherent to that process. And so it kind of builds up from there.
Right.
And
so I think we were going to connect this with the cognitive discrepancy.
Yes.
As well as the different dream states that we outlined. I forget which they are, like waking.
So we have lucidity and dreaming. That's two counterpoints, lucidity and dreaming. And then we have waking and sleeping.
Right.
So waking and sleeping is physical. Waking consists of all six senses being up and running. So that's your smell, your touch, your eyesight, your hearing, and
lucidity, dreaming, waking, and what?
Sleeping.
Sleeping. And I think we aligned those with the triad, but I think that was more of an expedition.
Yeah, I don't have any useful reference for that.
Okay.
What the differences are is that waking and sleeping it talks about the number of senses that are up. So in the waking sense, you have your body is
Six senses.
is aware. So you're processing your smells, your eyes, your sights, everything. In the sleeping mode, only the sixth sense is still functioning, which is your mind. Which is just your mind, as your eyes,
right?
Since all other sensations are turned off.
So that's what we're talking about here, sort of.
Yeah,
and then the senses are being ignored.
And then outside of that, you have being in the content of the dream, which is dreaming. So you can be in the content of your dream when you're awake, right? So daydreaming is an example of that, but also being lost in thought in general. Any mental, like any mental processes that are outside of processing what's happening right now, like thinking about the future, worrying about the past, any of those things is being in the dream.
And that's distinct from sleeping in that dream is more of an arbitrary.
Dream simply means that the mind is the mediator of all the narrative output. Right? You don't get unfiltered sensations. It's all sensations are recouped by the dream and placed into a narrative.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of qualities sensed now, right here and now, you have quantities of things out there in abstract space.
And juxtapose that with sleeping.
With sleeping, it was simply your other senses are all shut down, and you're still and you're still existing in the dream world. So, I need to contrast this with lucidity, not with sleeping and waking.
Okay.
Dreaming is contrasted with lucidity. Dreaming is finding the self object in the narrative in relation to others. Waking is, lucidity is recognizing the moment and recognizing the narratives passing through it. So lucidity is being in the moment. Dreaming is being outside the moment in the narrative space of
right. So this is the small chart and the big chart
of relationships and relations.
Right.
Small chart, big chart, yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Sleeping and waking are less important in terms of understanding this because they're only talking about what's active at the time.
Okay.
In a sleeping sense, the other senses simply are less functional, and the mind brings up about memories of those sensations. So they're all mind filtered. Whereas in whereas in the waking sense, you get all the senses, but generally you ignore the immediate moment of the senses in favor of their reinterpretation into dreamscape.
Right. Okay, so that kind of clarifies. Then I don't really know how waking and sleeping is really significant to us.
It's not the most significant thing outside of you can recognize what we're talking about through things like lucid dreaming. So when you're asleep, but you gain lucidity, so that phenomena is somehow where you can recognize the truth of what we're talking about.
And that's like a metaphor for it going from the big chart to the small chart. This being the small chart.
Yeah. Outside of this diagram is of course in a bigger context, which we have actually here. So as you're referring to the big diagram, I'm just going to show it. It's quite big.
It's huge.
Yeah, it's got...
I chopped it into 2 parts.
Yeah, it's kind of messy, but...
You can kind of overlay it, too.
Yeah, so you would see that
that
the circles kind of need to be sitting like that. But what we can see from here is that under the spectacle over here, we can see moment to moment to moment being strung together into one long
right, which is like what we experience.
Narrative over time, right? So what we're talking about is that each successive moment.
Let me just try to get it on the.
Yeah, each successive moment builds up the abstract space with more and more and more changing relations of things that are happening, right? And it's the attention to those...
It just doesn't want to focus.
It's just the attention of those to those things, the distraction by paying attention to just those things rather than the moment to moment to moment to moment phenomena is what we call dream. Whereas lucidity is the counter of that is paying attention strictly from the moment to moment to moment, not ignoring the contents of the dream, but reflecting that they are happening within moments and
Right.
only within moments, and they don't really go outside of that space to begin with.
So, and this is really an entryway or like a portal to the body itself. So this understanding this model is like one of the most fundamental ways of analogizing your way into that kind of lucidity,
Right.
where you recognize that I am a body, I am literally a machine that's doing all of this stuff.
So what we're doing is we're injecting this idea of lucidity.
A polymorphic machine, as we call it.
What we're doing is we're injecting this idea of lucidity into the dream by speaking about it, and so that next time the dream comes up, and in the dream the idea of lucidity itself comes up, you can use that to notice the feedback.
Right. So how does this relate back to we were bringing up the part about there being these two camps and like arguments that happen, and the problem with the faith bootstrap, it either is available or not.
So on the one hand side we have the runaway narrative. On the other hand side we have a narrative that keeps reestablishing itself in its
self context,
in its own self, right, without really a further reference to other things.
And I just want to maybe bring up that the fact that we brought up this thing happened on my Facebook, and we all can experience this, but my experience there was that there's nothing you can offer, there's no soundbite you can present, there's nothing gets through to when you're communicating with somebody who's running this kind of runaway narrative that's been captivated. Everything you say or do gets categorized in as if you're just this or you're that type of thing in their existing system, and nothing ever changes, and it's literally impossible to break it.
Yeah, so this is the discussion of why the Zeitgeist is both a tool for us and something that doesn't really work for us either. It's a bit of a
double-edged sword.
It's a double-edged sword. It's no. Fuck. The word there.
Catch-22. It is a
contradiction. It's like a not a contradiction. Logical. What do you call it? Fuck me.
Like fallacy? No.
Anyway, I'm blanking on the word. It's on the tip of my tongue.
Contradiction.
Not a contradiction. Every logical system has them. Gödel's theorem. They start to contradict itself, basically, logically. Anyway, my point there, besides the formal terminology, is Zeitgeist is a double-edged sword, and from two different perspectives. One is it's necessary for the system to utilize so that it has qualities to commodify.
Recuperation.
Yeah, so the more angst you feel, the more the system has the opportunity to sell you a trinket to alleviate said feeling. If you just do X, Y, Z, we have a perfect solution for you. Step right up, step right up. So part of the Zeitgeist is that it's a universal point of pain that is useful for marketing purposes. You will hear marketing people talk about the lizard brain. You got to go after the lizard brain. You got to give them that point of pain to solve the problem. And yeah, it was a disturbing conversation I had once.
Yep. But this is how mass narratives gain entry into the being, is through exploiting these pain points of the zeitgeist. There's something missing, there's some kind of anxiety or fear that's kind of free floating, nobody knows, and you exploit that. You say, this is what you're afraid of. This is what's happening, and we have the solution. So it's a dual soundbite.
So yes. So to speak to that situation on Facebook, let's just go over the small details. What was the small? What's the Cole's Note version of that event?
Well, so first off, to qualify, I am kind of known for poking the hornet's nest, if you will, and kind of playing up, say, one side or another sort of thing.
You're a troll.
You could say, like...
No, this is what trolls do.
I've gotten in trouble for it before, and I acknowledge that, but... So, okay, we'll just give the actual situation. The post itself was like a music video thing about saying we will not comply, and it was just a montage of protesting and this kind of stuff about this wedge issue, right? So I dumped
COVID. COVID is the wedge issue.
Dumped the wedge issue onto my my Facebook wall, and it's like these protests that are happening now every weekend. The biggest protest in human history is happening every weekend around the world, and so one of the comments comes up right away. Oh, boo-hoo, right? And then somebody else replies to that. They say, oh, so you're a Nazi, right? And then it snowballs from there. But the takeaway, I guess, for me was that there was no way to advocate for the protesters without the person who said boo-hoo, without saying, like, having something to say. They always would recoup and respond. They would be able to deflect anything that happened. There's no way.
They're wrong because this.
There was no way
that.
of injecting, like, okay, well, do you want this to happen? Do you believe in any kind of freedom? Do you think any of this? Whatever it was, they kept digging deeper and deeper, even deeper than I think they even originally would have thought acceptable themselves, like down to themselves. They just kept driving and driving as if they're playing one side of the thing, right? Mm-hmm. And there was no way, and it came down to the like them literally saying, like, anti-vaxxers should be thrown in camps. Like, that was one of their sound bites. They should be rounded up and thrown in camps.
I'd say that's a very wedge issue.
And and I couldn't, like, there's nothing I could say to, like...
Well, you could say no, they shouldn't.
That doesn't do anything, though. So this is kind of, I guess, in a nutshell, this is our scenario, if you will.
Why I brought it up is as I wanted to show the double-edged sword of the Zeitgeist. On the one hand side, it has a tendency to create pain that must be responded to, and that response, what our essential claim would be, is this understanding of what's happening in terms of becoming its own soundbite and injecting that into the process and watching for the feedback that occurs. However, most soundbites are not dealing with the moment; they're dealing with the content. And so,
right.
And so,
how do you even bring it to the moment discussion?
There's a very lucrative. This is why I was talking about the lizard brain thing. There's a very lucrative market due to the Zeitgeist, and that market is for specifically the myths of the system. So, your ills are due to the following narrative. Right? Your
Mm-hmm.
ills are due to this narrative. Religion is bad, it's causing all of these problems in the world. War is bad, we gotta stop war. Like,
right.
All of these different the peace soundbite, the economy soundbite, they're all carefully crafted
right.
responses to the pain inflicted by the Zeitgeist.
And they all seem to get recuperated, but this is what people interface with. This is how they're motivated. So this was kind of my big point here with even wanting to talk about all that Zeitgeist stuff, was that we have to package and present our own soundbite, which says something like, look, people are losing their freaking minds, and they can't even agree on anything to deal with the issues that we all care about because they're freaking losing their minds. This is the number one thing we have to deal with before we can even get to any of these issues.
Right. So the content of the conversation is secondary to us.
Right.
Because again, we perceive the zeitgeist to be the very same element that the system abuses to be the key element that allows the model, as we are presenting it, to also appear within the process.
Right.
So it's a double-edged sword in the sense that it's a very volatile entryway, but at the same time, it's the only entryway for this sort of stuff to actually have anything useful to address.
Right.
And this actually speaks very, very well to the fact that why most people find their quote-unquote religion in their most desperate times.
Right.
That's when it's recuperated by both systems.
That's great, and this is a great analogy for the story that we can see unfolding here is that as the commodification of all life presses forward and forward more and more, where it's kind of approaches a limit, that limit being the complete excavation of the soul, complete
of nature itself.
And at that point,
it has
there is
nothing to do.
nothing left, and all you feel is a whole hollow, empty pain of a shell, and this causes the need for what we call the artifact, for something to become injected back in, which is absolutely demanded.
Right, but it's also a point of danger as well, because this is where the charlatan makes himself known.
Well, yes, the charlatan has always been there.
Well, the charlatan serves the system.
Where the danger comes in is that when
the charlatan is the agency that serves the system that recuperates the zeitgeist.
Charlatan being the one who doesn't actually have an answer or a holistic
the
answer.
One that doesn't present the model, but pretends to.
Okay, now I just wanted to say that the actual danger, let's say actual or whatever, so we're tugging on those strings right now by saying actual danger. When you are hollowed out, you cannot know. You have no causal model. You have no causal map of how things work. Therefore, you are a complete infant floating in society, even as an adult.
And our causal model that we're referring to is specifically would be the one that we're presenting.
Right, one where you come through and see the self-reference in the moment and all this kind of stuff, and causal stacking and modeling through the body and out into the world. Without that, we have no way of having any power, any capacity to have any control over anything. Well, and that's where shit just can hit the fan.
Well, of course not,
max.
Because look at what we're saying. If we're stuck in a self-narrative loop, of course it will exhibit no real power because it's not connected to anything causally actually.
Right.
It's a circle in its own self that will continue to cycle until it exhausts itself out.
And in the modern times where we're reaching like kind of the end stages of commodification of all life, even to the point where you need a news feed to tell you what to consume and what to do and what to think. You're beyond. That's beyond anything that the people of the past had even imagined. Like they would still have a sense of control through the body to do things for themselves. We are beyond that. We have nothing. So we are at the point of absolute demand for the model through the zeitgeist.
Or collapse.
Right. Exactly. And right into another dark age and another cycle and all this. And yeah, so we need to find a way, because people are activated. They care about the environment. They care about whatever they care about. Lots of things which are great to care about, but they're fundamentally disconnected from any kind of causal model.
They're all narratives. They're all, again, stepping back, what we're saying through the model is that those things wind up being besides the point of the moment. The moment feeds those things, and so only whatever happens in the moment actually matters to the next moment. and
Right,
the
right.
inability to focus back on the
Yes.
moment creates a shit show in the dream that nobody is able to actually put a handle on.
So this is the artifact which we're presenting, and we're hoping to be taken up.
Its effect is definitely meant to be to stop pushing shit into the dream to the such an extent where you cannot follow it anymore.
Now,
So it does feel like a stepping away from the world in some sense.
right, but we need that in order to establish some form of reality, a grounding. Now, I just want to point out that whenever we become activated and agitated, if you will, for all these different various causes, the solution is always some abstract support this or donate to that
Right.
or hold a sign and do a protest. It has nothing to do with the actual problem
That's
itself.
that's the systemic mythology recuperating the zeitgeist. So this
Right.
is where the charlatan
So we need
is.
to avoid this shit and do real things. And sorry to say, the real work is to first ground yourself, and then you can go out into the network and network with each other to do something.
A network of grounded people, not a network
Right.
of
And so this is the guild.
ungrounded wannabes.
This is the guild, yeah, and all you have otherwise are
Well,
that.
ungrounded wannabes are in the charlatan boat.
But it's not their fault.
No.
This is what we're born into to
No.
interface that way. Right?
We are actually treading that line very, very, very carefully.
Trying to.
And
not to
not
fail.
necessarily succeeding all the time either, because we don't live the perfect life we're presenting. That's more of our own
Well, of course.
development.
As always, yeah, and but we all have our own capacity, our own capability, our own network reach. Like we get maybe 10
So
viewers or whatever. Like we're
from
just doing
there,
our best here.
yeah. So from there, we can actually move on to this diagram.
Right. And so this is the matrix,
Yeah, the
ontological matrix,
right.
which has been expanded to two sides. And now I can pull this up on the desktop. Let's maybe do that before.
Mhm.
Let's go to, oh shit. Why don't I delete that E?
So this diagram that we're going to show up on the screen soon is reflecting interactions in a shared space, essentially. And we're presenting it from a two-sided kind of a set, in which on the one hand side you have soundbite driven dreamlike comprehension moving forward from moment to moment, and conversely you have the opposing end, which uses the moment as the fundamental unit of reality, if you will. And what we're seeing in the diagram is them coming into a shared matrix from both sides. On the one hand side, you see ego agencies driven by mythology, and on the other hand side, you have members of the guild who are sort of like a unified presentation of the model, also interacting with the shared space within the ontology of things. Right, sort of. Just because, say, Brian and I hold different ideas in our heads, and say he's an egotistical agent and a Nazi, and I'm a perfectly rounded member, we can still share the ontological matrix and use English to communicate with each other and relate information about various things, and utilizing each other's mythologies.
Right, we share a space. Everybody shares a space.
Which means we can share the mythology and present agencies as necessary for the ontology to continue. the idea behind this diagram is to show that regardless of how the moment itself is interpreted, whether there is faith,
There we go.
whether the faith of the moment is participating in the interaction of the events of the moment.
This is a big diagram now. It kind of expanded.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's meant to show.
It gained a flip side.
It meant to show that there is a huge parallel happening.
So let's just quickly go through the top here. So we have market machine up at the top.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of the overall structure, what we call it, kind of like the emergent structure as a market machine happening, this interaction between egos.
It's a set of algorithms, really.
Right.
Those algorithms are produced via sound
Right,
bites.
right. And so the point of this is to, the point of this, the top end of this chart is to illustrate how the current society, the breakaway civilization, whatever you want to call it, how we interact as agents in this matrix through our ego, the ego itself being this commodified structure of the self-reference, and how we use that to say, okay, I'm going to buy a cheeseburger. Well, you are the cash register attendant, so I give you the money, you give me the burger.
Yeah,
this is
we are two different agents interacting in our matrix.
Right, we have some shared media, the countertop and all this, and like chip card readers and all that we interact through, and something happens.
So I like the way you're presenting it, because look at also the very far left-hand side. It says obfuscated meta-narrative. Now, through those interactions, right, you pay money to the cashier. You don't know the cashier. Cashier gives you change. She doesn't know you. She tells the cook to do something. They don't know each other. At no point is there a single unit of something interacting with itself.
Mm-hmm.
It's only like disparate connected cogs doing one tiny little specified thing, disconnected from the others, and so they don't know anything about the rest of the process.
This brings us back to the whole discussion that we just had about coming into a self-reference through the moment, because in that moment you would, through knowing and understanding yourself as this moment processing polymorphic machine, would know that you are in an environment where others like you are existing and are real, and there's another context to know yourself and those around you, aside from what's presented through this ontological matrix.
Soundbite by soundbite by soundbite.
The soundbite is,
which take a moment away entirely.
The soundbite is, I'm the sandwich maker. Cook, give me a burger. That soundbite goes over the wave. Burger, cook, come, meta-narrative, which is metastable, in that it all kind of holds itself together, but there's no
like a house of cards.
There's no big meaning to it all.
Well, right.
We're
like
all just flipping
shit
shit and doing that.
You remove one little element of it, shit crumbles up the top, and nobody knows why.
Right. Yeah.
So that's a juxtaposition we're presenting with living in the dream versus living in the moment, in which you recognize you recognize not you still have sound bites, you still have a meta narrative to begin with, but the issue of obfuscation now becomes removed, since the meta narrative matches up to the meta narrative of all involved, since they all carry the same inner understanding of the moment. And that inner understanding of the moment will never make the dream the focal point of everybody.
Right.
Which means nobody fights over dreams.
And this is a hard task, really. How do you convince people to care about that?
Carefully.
Exactly. So, like the example of the you should be in or anti-vaxxers should be in a concentration camp. Like,
yeah,
that's their soundbite.
That's a great way to stay up at the top of this chart.
Like, we are so far disconnected from each other as human beings when that statement is made.
Well, look at what happens when that statement is made based on this chart. The ego portion does not change. The myth portion does not change. The matrix portion does not change. The agents get shuffled around, which means egos get crumbled and crushed.
Right.
And that's it. That is the only outcome. And the thing continues. What the fuck for?
Mm-hmm. There's some kind of exploit there to cause... the obfuscated meta-narrative causes us to not to care about each other.
Well, if the narrative is obfuscated, how do these agents know that the other ones are agents of ego? They can't.
They don't.
It's obfuscated. They all think they have an ego. Look at all the philosophy that came out about ego. It's something we apparently possess, like a soul, which makes it absolutely bullshit. But whatever. That's just my personal biases here. But yeah, my point there is like it's obfuscated to the point of where one agent does not recognize that the ego feed they're being fed through the reward and punishments through is the same thing that all other agencies that they're so busy fighting against are doing.
Right. And so it's not something that we have necessarily, but it's something kind of an imposition from above, quote unquote, as a part of this
Mechanism, market mechanism.
Did we want to pull up the flame there? Is that where we're going with that? Or?
The flame certainly is.
Like, so we didn't actually go into the next part of this chart, which would be the bottom right, which we've added.
Yeah.
Now.
So the bottom is more of a demonstration that the ontological structure of the matrix itself will never actually change. We're not fighting to change the fact that there is an ontological matrix. We're not fighting for this is what's real, this is what that's not real, because that's objectivism. What we're showing there is that the isomorphic structure looks very much similar to the dysmorphic one. However, certain things shift around. First, we're talking about holons, which means the sound bites lose their quality of being unique. They become far more metaphorical in a way. So they're not like algorithms to be exercised in very certain situations, which would be sound bites. They are more like descriptions of these situations that pertain to all situations as an interrelated thing.
Right.
Secondary to that, we no longer see ego, but altruism being the fundamental drive. What the fuck does that mean?
So wait, hold on. It's in
this context.
When a soundbite comes up, it's taken as when it's taken as a whole on. This is to like sort of analogize it or use it as an analogy.
Yes, metaphor
instead of a strict command order.
Yeah, which still exists in the schema, but they're far less
there's
immediate.
There's more to it because you're jumping layers, I think.
Yeah.
To higher order.
Because any one command has to take into account what it's affecting after the fact, right? Like why, if there's a multiplicity of ways to do something, which way should you do it? For example, a soundbite command generally ignores all of that, saying it's all irrelevant, and this is what you do.
Because it slots into a machine.
Right. It's a gear. In this case, we're talking about a full-blown environment at all times, always context, always many things moving at the same time. What does one method of doing it versus another one mean to that context? And so this is why it's a hold-on, because there's never an unconstrained soundbite that isn't constrained by everything else at the same time. Hence, it's whole always.
Right.
And this leads into why there's an altruism instead of an ego. An ego separates into different agencies because different agents get different rewards and punishments by the system. So they're slotted. Altruism removes the slotting, which allows an intermixing of agency. So somebody could step in for somebody else, and all of those things. There's no direct connection of like this body is this role and this identity only. It's all becomes ephemeral.
Not only that, but um, the altruistic member isn't necessarily doing something as part of a calculated computation where if I do this, then I get this.
Right, right. It's not about reward and punishment. It's about what is in demand and what is being supplied in that moment. Because life makes demands.
Can you text me the link for the stream? I need to update my Telegram still. I can't access it on my phone.
For the stream, text you the link.
Yeah, because it's on the lobby. I posted it there, but I can't access it. Right. So this ontological matrix is this world of interaction, ultimately between beings, controlled by their either agents or their membership, in various contexts.
Controlled,
depending what.
Either controlled through a controlled agent, or self-mediating member. That's the difference. A member is not controlled by anything.
No, I mean
It's self.
controlling the environment is what I meant.
Yeah, I think the word control belongs to the upper part of the diagram, because it has to do with the reversal of order and chaos in the you know how they flip.
Right.
That's the major issue there. You can't
okay,
power
well,
control and everything. You have
I guess we've already been over this.
You have resonance wakes, you have projection, you have magic, you have that. You can say it's control, but it's not. It's a skill.
Not in a computational sense.
The difference is that here the soundbite does say control and hierarchy and everything like that, whereas in the opposite end, it's recognized that we're dealing with resonance wakes, and we're not talking about anything controlling anything, but rather things resonating and projecting and
right,
and
okay.
fiat existing. And
the
all of
the
that.
word control implies a very binary situation.
Yeah, it's a utility. Control is the utility of fiat to the point of where only the horizontal resonance is accounted for, but none of the vertical up the stack stuff is considered. So it has. So with it comes the reification problems, right? If you don't reify the chaos you're causing, you're still going to cause the chaos. You're just not going to have any utility for dealing with it. Right? So that's that. This is more about how in the top level part of the diagram, and the agents in the matrix and the agents and all of that, you have a situation where the bottom gets pushed to fight over concepts, and which dream gets to continue. Right. So if we imagine these two, this has been two separated ego stacks that are in conflict.
So this is like left and right or whatever.
Yeah,
we were just
they will be
talking
they will be sending the bottom of their group, people who have the least value to the rest of the group, to grind it out and fight over who gets to be the winner. Which ego, which version of ego.
Right. Take a break time.
Pee break. You have
all
to know.
Right.
You all have to know.
Yep. Be right back. Mm-hmm.
Just thinking. I was thinking about like how I keep saying obfuscated meta-narrative, and it just occurs to me that some people might listen to this and be like, so what are you trying to do? So put like your whole life on a sleeve, if you will, and just like tell everybody like the play-by-play of your whole life and have no privacy and all that. So I just wanted to I just wanted to address that a little bit and say, no, that's not the intent here. The idea is not to present every aspect of your life as if it's like absolutely necessary to put everything on record.
And this is reminding me of the whole communism debate.
Right. We're not in the in obfuscation here. Is the deliberate hiding of information that we're railing against.
Right.
Information that pertains to the to the public and
Yes.
is being hidden away from it.
In the context of
Not
this,
personal lives.
the ontological matrix,
Yeah.
your actual social context.
Yeah, it's being hidden away from you, and that is what we're railing on. We're not railing on you like having to do personal stuff. Like I sure as hell wouldn't want anybody else's nose in my business either. So
And
we're
it's,
not.
it's weird even to say hidden away from you, because the manager at Burger King doesn't try to keep you from.
But he has to. He's legally bound to not like diverge this information about the company, for example.
Well, yeah, okay, yeah. The structure of the company itself. I was thinking like how we structure our own lives. Like that's not the fault of the manager. That's a decision which is made unconsciously because we don't know any better.
Well, there's that, but there's also the push to live your life like a business,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah, that's what I mean.
that's
But
the
who
other one.
pushes that? The manager doesn't really.
No, the manager is swept up by the same process.
Mm-hmm.
Especially if they have no money, like if they're like a Burger King manager or something.
Right.
Bill,
Yeah.
do you remember Bill? Ugh.
I'm not gonna remember.
I refuse. I refuse that memory.
Not now.
That's a character.
Yeah. So the whole Zeitgeist thing. The worse it gets, the more potent what we call the artifact becomes in the face of it.
Potent, and also the more violent the reaction is to it. Potentially.
Yes, but yeah. So there's a top-down thing where we can evangelize, quote unquote, or people can just be holistic, and you're like, what the fuck? Why did he just give that person something for free, or like why did them help that person, or like it can just boggle your mind, like.
Or having like a community of people amass somewhere that's outside of the general understanding of why.
Right.
It's like that becomes a real sore point for authorities immediately.
Right. And it's a sore point for anybody. It causes that dissonant feeling because you see something.
And you can't control it.
Right. It's weird. So there's almost like two ways. One is like an out and out like, I'm coming to you and I want you to see the moment. And the other is like, why are these people like so happy right now? Like
I'm not happy. They shouldn't be either.
Yeah, like so. There's kind of two ways it seems of evangelism. One is simply providing the example, which just pisses people off because you're happy or whatever, or like you're having community.
Well, look at the way the sound bites work on the situation. What is normally perceived is that, oh, you think you're better than me. Right? As soon as we have this conversation with other people, for example, why do we always step back and be like, no, we're not. We're also stupid. We're all like, why do we have to continue to do that? Because the soundbite is still
Why do we have
at
to
work.
rail over and over again on how stupid we are?
Right, and that has to do with this soundbite being fed right away. That has to do with, oh, well, this person is doing better, but they must be better. They must think themselves better.
Okay.
There must be that ego
Okay.
that I have to grind myself against.
So, this is the point of that moment capture, in the moment diagram, where Nothing outside of your established narrative is allowed. It's not allowed. And whenever somebody is doing something, it must be because they are this. It must be because they are that. It must be because they are
Part
that.
of the narrative, part of this narrative. Part
So
of this
something already established. So
pre-established, yeah.
for example, I got called all kinds of names you could say, like right wing and like this like Trump lover and like everything out of the book just because I post this thing about
There's an interesting
protesting.
phenomena that is very real to people that it can be talked about. This, your Facebook feed, for example, it's an AI algorithm that does what? It takes your past interactions and tries to predict based on them what your future will be, right?
Mm-hmm.
Compare this to this image, right? Past sound bites feeding back into what the next foreground should be.
Yeah.
Over and over and over and over again.
Yep.
What is its what so the irony here is that we tend to think of our technologies, our advancements as progress, as moving forward, as doing whatever it is to keep going, right? But what is this picture is actually showing us is that all we're doing is regurgitating the past over and over and over and
Right.
over, meaning our entire concept of progress is actually complete stagnation.
Mm-hmm. It's calcifying along the forest path, and forest paths are normal. They're normal to be walked. But again, there has to be something else. We have to be able to stop walking in the middle of the forest. Just stop in that path and look around you.
Mm-hmm. Well, but the irony of it, though, like the very nature of going forward through with the narratives is actually a stagnating situation.
Right.
There is no movement. Which brings up another point in that the whole dreams thing is entirely arbitrary, and only the moment is what could be focused on. It shows that shows that in a different way.
I'm sure a myth of progress probably.
Well, the myth of progress is one of the sound bites to recuperate the zeitgeist. That's actually why it came up now. As soon as that list came up, I'm like, oh shit, that's relevant.
Right.
So yeah, that's the picture. Now, from there, we did want to go.
So we wanted to pull together a whole bunch of charts, I guess, in this meeting. Just kind of like tie together a bunch of things, and so yeah, let's keep moving along, and just see what else we can pull into this artifact.
Part of this, actually, these two are relevant to each other in this discussion. All right.
Almost. We almost.
So-
we're almost there.
We try to touch on the point that there is two approaches to move into the ontological matrix. One is laced with opposameness, in that it wedges people on subjects where one way or the other. It separates people.
And that's a historically consistent thing where you have otherness and egos being shoved into the fire, burned
We're
up,
number one.
burnt up.
We're number
Always
one.
conflict is coming up. Right? the self and the other, the us and the them.
So part of this discussion is to try and touch on why there is a tendency towards the buildup of ego and agency as being a more what would you call it, a path of least resistance, if you will.
Right.
And to do that, we're going to dive back into an older subject called the cognitive alignment window. that is a treatment of the subject from the perspective of the neural OS. Specifically, its layers: the concrete, the abstract, the mimetic, and the shared. In general, and there was a small realization over the couple of weeks there that the cognitive alignment window discrepancy, i.e., when the alignment window is moved up beyond the horizon towards to capture the narrative,
which is the normal quote-unquote setting.
Yeah, it is also the point at which we have a reversal of order and chaos in terms of manifestation. By that I mean order now gains primacy over chaos. So to step back into our earlier analogies, the relationship between the two is such that you generally have a chaotic space out of which you see patterns creating order, and so order is simply a variation on something chaotic, and chaos is something that is just not captured by order, and they're kind of like feeding off of each other.
Right. So
in this case, we have order with the neglect of chaos, so only this is real, everything else is unreal, sort of thing.
So you're saying that these two ways of order of perception, let's say, one is kind of putting, let's say, chaos on the pedestal, and the other is putting order on the pedestal.
The first one would not put chaos on the pedestal, but see their relationship as one and the same. Absurdity. See the relationship. So you don't have a discrepancy between the two. Order is simply a different formulation of the chaos, taken from a different perspective.
Yeah.
So depending on how you view your field of chaos, you see order in here, you see order there, you see order here. Out of what you're given, how can you create the next layer? The next layer becomes your standard of order, but the chaos doesn't change.
We need to step back here a little bit and go into just a tiny bit of history with this this chart here, in that we've identified this window here where this is your your object of perception here is, or your perception is filtered through the neural operating system as what can be more directly perceived, more or less.
Right. So
this gives you a more closer to grounded view of reality, if you will. And when you shift the window up, this is where you skip past this horizon here, the horizon, and suddenly things take a solid feeling. A feeling of reality. Continuity happens up here. But what you sacrifice in this window is an understanding of the dynamic between the concrete and the abstract. This gets lost. And in that you think everything is solid. This is reality. Reality is real. That's what this window shows you. This window shows you reality is being constructed as a dynamic here.
And the very lower part of it, the meme, is the basic construct, that the only construct that really is assembled into anything at all, where with type and object being a sort of like almost like a camera filter, if you will, for the final image, so that the mental constructs have some kind of correlation with an ongoing narrative,
right?
Which is entirely ephemeral and made up after the fact, beyond the horizon which we actually have a perception of. What we perceive is ultimately objects of a kind appearing and disappearing and appearing and disappearing, and we fill in the gaps of that as to how they've come about to progress from phase 1 to phase 2 to phase 3, which we call the narrative. But that narrative rests entirely out of the perceptive construct and is just assembled on the fly. So hence it's not, since it's not in the perceptive horizon, it is the narratives comes back at us as yet one more object that appears, we can reason about, and it disappears again. But because of our because of their complexity and whatever, they seem like a solid, continuous thing happening out there beyond
And
the ether.
this relates back to our discussion just now about the dream and all that. When you're in the dream, everything feels contiguous. There's no gaps. You just, I am walking here. I'm having a coffee or whatever. It all links together nicely.
And when you become lucid of the dream, especially in lucid dreaming, you start to see how things appear and disappear out of your cognition, right? Because you're aware of it being a dream.
Just
and
watching objects
and
come
you're
and go.
just like, oh, so my mind made this up, my mind made that up, and you know it's you.
Right.
So that's like the key there. So that's a discrepancy window. Now, having a solid narrative like that does tend to glue the discrepancy window to that mode, right? So, because it works so well, right? Like teeth for teeth and claws, or whatever. The tendency is to not really try to question this, since this seems to come naturally.
And once again, we're not saying this is bad. Oppose this.
This is necessary to again escape teeth and claws. I've been saying this since forever. So all of these things. It's a path of least resistance for a reason.
In our glorious advancement of civilization, the teeth and claws actually come in this form itself, in the form of doing this itself, to exploit the fact that this happens.
Right.
And so we need to shift the window down, and
to become immune to it. Yes.
This is how we come back to the moment.
And the other thing that gets lost in the window is the fact that we bottom out at type, which means we bottom out at abstract thinking. We don't bottoming out in this sense means that we've reached our narratives demand abstractions, and trying to penetrate abstractions yields no fruitful narratives, and so it feels as if though there's nothing below that, right? You there's no motivation to dig deeper.
And this is what enables the feeling of a reality being a construction of certain types of things that are allowed to happen, being solid. So the whole reality itself and all its existence, and this talks to like the capture of the mind through the mass narrative and all that kind of stuff, being able to be in that mode where no matter what somebody says in discussion, your only process is to take in the sense data of what they're saying and categorize it. Nothing will ever change. Nothing in your worldview will change. You're locked. You're literally locked in.
Right.
And a good portion of the population is in this type of a state in any totalitarian system.
And on top of that, because there is no room for the mimetic element to negotiate with, so you're not saying to yourself things like my instincts have a validity, for example, because now you're relegating it to thought and thinking like things like instincts are just nature's unknowing way of doing stuff, and therefore should not be used. We should only rationally solve situations, right? So instead of allowing the mimetics to actually propagate through your mental processes, your body telling you certain constructing it through ineffable intuitions, the mindset becomes hardened up against it in a sense of ignoring it, neglecting it, and the buildup of the soul is actually made through this process. Right. This is the neglect that we're discussing, really. And then the question then becomes as well, how do we know that there is a alignment window to begin with, and that the memes are there and whatever. And this is not an answer that has what do you call it? There's nothing to sell here.
There's meditations.
Exactly. This is the kind of thing that faith bootstrap is supposed to resolve. In that you take that on faith, you let this sit in the moment and see for yourself whether this is the case or not, and derive truth value based on that, without our ability to further communicate anything wordly
And
wise.
At the risk of all this triggering and stuff, or causing certain thought patterns from words, but like just getting back to this whole like protest thing and about vax mandates and all that, there's been note of like the definition of vaccine has been changed recently. The definition of anti-vaxxer has been changed to include those who don't want mandates of vaccines, right? So if you don't want people to be forced to have a vaccine, you're against the vaccine itself. You're not just against like forcing, like, anyways.
Mm-hmm.
But you get what I'm saying. Like the definitions change, and these changes come through mass media, and this what I wanted to bring
Like
up.
the war on Christmas.
What I wanted to bring up was that
Fox News is very adamant about it.
the problem here being highlighted with this cognitive discrepancy window is, does one have the ability to peer and pierce their own reality and the meaning of types and things of what
Right,
what
like
they mean?
why does this
Can it
mean
change
that
and
to
be
me?
amorphous? Why does it mean that? And so if you are dealing with
And how did it become so inflexible?
if you're dealing with a Trumper, and what does that mean? Like when you have a human being that you're talking to directly, just because you've decided they are a Trumper, what could convince you that they are more than that or less than that, or that they aren't, or like once you've made up your mind, where is the facilities to navigate reality in how you
Well, you're asking the question that
apprehended
you're asking a begging question right there, because what you're doing is you're saying where in your narrative, right, which is already in a losing position by being in the discrepancy,
right.
where in the narrative does that fit? And it doesn't. It can't.
It's yeah.
The only reason that the artifact about memes ever makes it through this shit show, like to filters through it all, is that the zeitgeist in the narrative has a slot for it that trickles through the whole process. It is unaware of it, and it is deathly afraid of it, if you will, to anthropomorphize. Anthropomorphize. If you were to anthropomorphize the zeitgeist, it's deathly afraid of that. It's a death blow to it. It's a death blow not to it, to the egos involved.
Mm-hmm. Right. And yeah, so I just wanted to point out that this cognitive alignment window, if it's stuck, you have a serious problem navigating reality, because you cannot
Not reality.
learn. You can't learn from what's right in front of you.
You only get stuck there if you're trying to navigate reality. That's the other thing I wanted
explain.
So,
I just meant
this
navigate what's right in front of you.
this ties into objectivism and solipsism, but I need a small break.
Good.
I'm going to tie it to stupidity.
Nice. Good. Beer red bags. We back.
So let's try to tie this back to the spectrum of stupidity that we've been discussing.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd like to just draw your attention to...
We still on this?
Yep. I'd like you to draw your attention to type and object, and tell me if you noticed anything about those two particular
Notice?
do you notice anything about them that might suggest to you objectivism or solipsism?
Well, actually, to me, it kind of seems maybe reversed, because objectivism might be towards a worship of the abstract system, and solipsism towards the spectacle of what you're actually experiencing.
Close.
That's my guess.
Narrative would be your solipsistic, unhinged reality.
Hey, you cheated. You said object and type, didn't you?
I did. My bad.
But, yes. Okay.
I'm actually a little bit divided on this, so I think we should develop it together. Callousness is probably closer to type. Indifference to other types. Objects.
Are we bringing affect back into this? Where's our affect chart? Did we? Or we do have the new affect chart.
Yeah,
but anyways,
but
okay, fine.
So there's a map in here: callousness, maliciousness, and adversary.
Okay, so we didn't even start talking about what we just dubbed coherence dynamics. This spreadsheet is from probably months ago.
Mm-hmm.
And it describes coherence as well as incoherence, kind of the shadow side of coherence.
The reverse. But what I'm trying to actually get into here is that in the narrative box, right, we see spin. Right? This is where spin is. Marketing, spin,
okay.
all of that kind of shit.
Right.
This is the ground level for adversary. That's who we're.
Okay, and so you're saying adversary. Where are we at adversarial?
It's a third degree of coherence, maliciousness.
Okay.
Degree
and
of
so we've got a dividing line
hostility
here.
Right. The actual point is not the callous, malicious, adversarial part, but to map narrative to solipsism and object to objectivism. So, in the...
Well, that's shifted one up from what I said, but same story probably.
Yeah, probably. Yes.
This is where you're calcifying stuff down towards this way, and this is where you keep encountering new fluffy stuff.
Right.
On the top side.
The clouds, exactly. So the idea here is that the spectrum of stupidity hugs the top corner, hugs the top two tiers of the discrepancy alignment window, allowing the callous type people to not give a shit and just keep running the show. So so on the objectivism side, you find your scientists.
I see what you're doing. You're trying to line up the spectrum of stupidity with this window.
Yes.
These three here.
Yeah.
So.
With type not being included, by the way. Type is kind of like an overarching.
Callous.
Yeah, the callousness is what because a callousness is not objective or solipsistic. It's just not caring. Right? Like there's no question about reality or self. There's just a question of which soundbite do we inject now. totally
Mhm,
unrelated,
mhm, mhm.
unconnected to anything.
Okay, I get it. I think I like it.
And
If
so,
that lines up, then great. Wow,
what you
great.
have is that the spectrum of stupidity is actually being utilized by the callous to propel the system forward
Right.
as it's going, which makes them a very small minority, the billionaires, the Rockefellers, and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
They're not in the business of qualifying reality. They're not in the
Yeah,
business of qualifying
yeah.
morality.
It's more like
They're in the business of propelling the sound bites.
pragmatic sort of thing.
Not even. They're not pragmatic. They're, well,
Yeah, I mean that in a cold, in the cold
Yeah,
way.
yeah,
in a
yeah.
cold way of just
pragmatic to the
I'll say
to
this,
us
I'll
to
spew
the
that.
system. Yeah, they're not
Yeah.
they're not alive.
You just say what needs to be said to get the thing done.
Their bodies might be alive, but they're animated corpses themselves.
All right. So did we want to actually get into coherence dynamics here at all? Because we wanted to link together.
I think I'd want to mention that
our original plan. So we're an hour and a half in, so we still got time.
right.
We're not
so
even at
so
the
the only
halfway mark.
the only relevant element of coherence dynamics right now is to say is that in the discrepancy window you find your spectrum of stupidity, and then on top of that, within the spectrum of stupidity, you can actually expect callousness, maliciousness, and adversarial stances
Right.
within the ontological matrix. So this is the forces, if you will, that play against the artifact being installed.
Callous, malicious, adversarial. So wait, you're linking these though. So we said objectivist,
Callous,
solipsistic.
malicious, adversarial. So there's double mapping.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which-
so we just wanted.
So
to...
callousness doesn't really factor into the spectrum of stupidity. It simply needs it to exist.
Gotcha. Okay, so again, we're just kind of mapping up things and linking them up.
Mm-hmm. So this is to show the relationship between members and agents. This is to show the relationship between a cognitive window and the
Where is
spectrum.
members and agents?
So member and agent, they're here, but this is really about. That was a reference
Right.
to the other.
ontological matrix.
To the ontological matrix picture. What we're saying is that members and agents have to interact in the matrix in the middle,
Mm-hmm.
and because of that, this is all relevant in that this
Right.
coherence dynamics is going to play out as part of the interaction.
Right. So this whole discussion about the moment, of the ability to have the moment exist in your reality, quote unquote. So to be part of your process, a knowledge of the moment itself.
That this
This
is
is
a
what-
moment.
So does this link directly to the ability to shift the cognitive alignment window?
Yes.
How?
So narrative, by definition, is everything but the moment. It's what the moments construct. And so, in seeing the object, you are actually capturing moments to moment to moment.
And that's this horizon dotted line.
Right. Which
Right.
which makes a very interesting point is that the dream is in fact unreachable, despite the fact of our binding
Right.
to it as far as we have. It is
Yeah.
in fact beyond the horizon and is unreachable to us. So that's number one about point number one about why it's a discrepancy.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So.
Yeah, and unreachable is kind of a weird word. And
Unreachable in the sense that it is untouchable. It is the world out there that you cannot see, smell, or
Right.
touch, or
it's so our interaction with it is
It's the
always
spirit world,
is
if you will.
always kind of ephemeral and come and go.
Yeah.
It's never. it's never as solid as
It is that which has been mistaken for the spirit world, or not mistaken, but called the spirit world before, the invisible hand of the market
Right.
today.
Mhm.
It's all of those ineffable qualities that are operational and yet untouchable, and still causative and yet
Right.
aren't there.
And yet we aren't railing against it. This is a natural
Right.
phenomenon.
Again, teeth and claws are
This is the
are
normal way of that people can relax in reality, basically.
Yeah. So, with that,
Without dissecting it.
we're also reaching an explanation as to why, on the solipsistic side, you have ridiculous narratives, and on the objectivistic side, you have science. Ridiculous narratives me referring to religious narratives in general. They're just an amalgamation of the zeitgeist being recuperated over and over and over and over again. Hence, they have no clarity and completely are obfuscated and become unrealistic to anybody with a anybody who is technically minded, if you will, which is why science has made such inroads in terms of dislodging religion as a
Okay.
main meta narrative.
So this is very kind of just an interesting thing to note, that the solipsist is focusing on something beyond the horizon that's inherently ineffable,
Right.
and they're claiming it as reality, truth, and all this kind of stuff when it's
Right.
really subjectively experienced.
Well, not reality and truth. So here's the kicker. The reality and truth is still objectivistic. It's just that the choice of objects is fucked up, right? So the objects getting picked up, their relationships, they make no sense to begin with. So they're arbitrary.
Yes.
But they're still objectivistic in the sense that they are things in a matrix interacting. So that point is objectivistic, but the narrative constructed is solipsistic in the sense that it does not bear any resemblance to anything. Right? It's not isomorphic.
I guess that's the kind of point I was trying to get at, the solipsistic ability to construct things which are completely more or less ungrounded, being beyond that horizon of even experience.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Really.
Just yeah, it's taking the abstract and flipping it right up. Now,
Okay.
Now,
Okay,
the development in the modern times is, of course, we've gotten very clever in the technical sense, and so the objectivist mindset started to flourish because the technicalities allowed it. And so we've now moved from dictatorship by narrative to dictatorship by object, if you will. What this really is pointing to is not an actual shift, because you still have the overlaying political climate, which is entirely solipsistic, but it's become much more capable of enforcing its mandates. So, even though religion got dislodged as the main narratological institution to decimate the narrative, the scientific one rose to take its place, but as a utility. So instead of the staying within the confines of whatever objects are decimating, another narrative was created on top that religion essentially creates scientism out of that. Is the short version.
Kind of lost me.
So, experimentation in the objective world yields
Right.
consistent
Right, right.
results.
So
the
yeah.
institutions dealing with objectivism rise. They take over the
Yeah,
control mechanisms that the callous types utilized. So what's happening basically is that you have your priests,
Okay.
and then you have your
Hold
enforcers.
on. We have a new system of scientism where the professionals have taken the place of the priest.
Yes.
And to say the crazy things that Neil deGrasse Tyson states and all this kind of whatever.
Well, he's a prime example of totally being lost in that system, because if you look at the individual, right, he is in general trying to do the right thing. Like he's got the objectivist mindset, right, and he's got his soundbite repertoire of this is right, this is wrong, this is modern myths of the system.
Yep.
And so he's sitting there like a tool, obviously, like a very clever tool, running that same algorithm over and over and over and over.
But being elevated up into that narrative slot where the narratives shower down onto the people.
Right. This
these
is
sound bites.
This is the next layer of the media. So he's doing his thing, and then the next layer of the media that formulates narratives, the professional media, if you will, takes all of that as utilities, and so it's now a less direct relationship, because before media and narrative producers were one and the same.
Right.
Now it's just the managerial of
So
enforcers
you're saying,
are the ones that are pushing the narratives
you're saying
through the same system.
not even so much his fault, just that these scavengers are coming along and picking the right narratives and just propagating those, the ones that,
and rewarding
that fit the
him,
system.
also rewarding him in the
Oh,
process.
feels good to get
and
likes.
punishing others that do not, so that only his catered narrative is the one that we all get to perceive as the true statements of science.
You can only kiss a mirror on the lips.
My God. No, you can't. It doesn't have lips, you retard.
Only.
It's an image.
Try kiss it somewhere else.
It's
Just try it. For science.
I pucker my lips like this.
Cheek. Pucker my cheeks. Cheek kiss.
Is he like not married or something? Does he not know how to treat a woman?
Pressed ham.
Anyway.
Yeah, so we're just into the whole milieu,
Shrek
if you will. So, what do we have? So this is great. I like that.
So two things. So,
Do we want to go anywhere else with these coherence dynamics?
we want to solidify two impressions that came up from it, and that is A, the cognitive alignment window is an important element to note in the moment, because it is also the incubator of the spectrum of stupidity. So two things that can happen there: either you are on that spectrum, or you are so unhinged by it all that you just use it as a tool, without without any reference to anything else.
This makes me ask a question which I think I know the answer to, is that when the cognitive alignment window is shifted down to within the neural operating system's capacity, is there room for stupidity?
Yes.
And how does that happen?
Well, you can still align your window and use the wrong soundbite. So this is where you get into the gripes I have about Taoism and Brahmanism and any of those systems that that have a presupposed ontological priori. Anything that has an ontological priori will fall into this.
And what is a priori again?
It means that
Something assumed to exist before.
For one, it binds you to an ontological matrix to begin with a hierarchy. AKA, there is only one. Not that there is an ontological matrix in the moment, but that there is a dreamlike setting in the abstract, off of which moments move and come back to. So this,
Right.
in and of itself, already should tell you what the problem is,
These
because
type of
because it's
constructions.
again removing you from the moment to the dream,
Right.
and that is
And
what
we're making some abstract constructions
yeah,
as reality,
yeah. So for
which is
that,
useful, very useful.
as a stepping stone, sure,
But
like our own ontological matrix of the ontological matrix. It's a stepping stone to get to the point of realization. However, to hold on to any of
And
them,
then this makes
become-
me think that even like the moment chart, the moment diagram, even when coming into the moment and seeing moment after moment happen, and your memeplex coming up and morphing
And empathy and
to
a
next step and
sympathy.
step, still you don't take these as existent as it is, because that would be to take the model which you've created as reality itself.
right? So the
And-
representation
and
of it,
to kind of
rather,
shut down the further learning of that,
yeah.
and that's
So
what causes problems.
what will happen then is, if you were to do that with the moment, if you were to just apply your this soundbite and leave it at that, is that you've done exactly the same thing that the soundbite is telling you not to. In that you have utilized, sorry, in that you have utilized the moment.
Just thought I'd make a spectacle of it.
Thought I was quiet.
Carry on with the moment. Oh, you're quiet. Silent but violent, as they say. That's the worst when it's quiet.
Usually doesn't happen that way. Anyway, yeah, look, it would be basically to use the moment to do exactly what the moment.
Go back into the dream.
To go back into the dream.
With the moment, clutching the moment in your hands.
Yeah,
like pearls.
into its decimated meaning in terms of that dream, rather than staying with the moment to begin
Right.
with and letting it
Yeah.
all of that go.
Yeah, it's pointing to a primordial function of existence, of the self, of what the self just keeps doing. You can't label it and post it and put it into a little box and
Of
carry
words.
it and carry it along with you.
And then pass the words along as if it's something that you can
it's
do.
At best an artifact that keeps reminding you to experience the thing happening and do it again.
Right. So, again, a
And
self-perpetual DNA
this
kind of thing.
this kind of bullshit, so to speak, quote unquote, just reminds me of how difficult it is to convey. And what are we like? Let's say that this is everybody who cares about environmentalism and the world, Fukushima and war and all this stuff. They all care about that. Why do they care about something so ephemeral you can't even hold on to it? And how is this going to actually do anything about anything? Right?
Thoughts that nobody likes to think because it makes them feel extremely useless, and it's a very painful response. But this is the end of it. In that,
Well, we just
if you
keep going. Just
but
keep
yeah,
going.
Well, my point to that would be, like, if you think that existence is on paper and what you sign and what you stand for and what you symbolize, then I'm sorry that existence is going to exist in symbols and things and whatever, except in the people that do it. Except, like, they're going to be excluded from whatever they say existence is. They're excluding themselves from existence.
You can see the discrepancy, the what would be the word? The irony is a better word, but yeah, there's something happening, like
Contradiction.
it's an inherent contradiction. Which is what's happening, and you can see it happening.
That was the word I was trying to remember before. It's a contradiction.
Well, yeah. Consistently.
Paradox. Paradox was the word. Sorry, not
There
contradiction.
you go, because we brought up contradiction.
Yeah, paradox was the word. All logical systems will wind up in paradox.
Right.
And that is
Right.
mathematical.
And so it's so weird, and it's hard to rally behind paradox. How do you rally behind it? How do you even build a community? How do you even get anybody to understand that, that this is important, that doesn't matter how much you try to save the Earth or the planet.
And to top it all off, we present this saying that all logical systems are paradoxical, so therefore this logical system that we're presenting is a paradox.
Right.
So yeah, there's
but
another
the point of it
of
is
sale.
the paradox.
But that's the other element of having a hard time quote unquote
This is
selling
like a
it.
Zen,
Isn't that how do you sell a paradox?
It's like a Zen type thing. The product is a cone.
You're back.
Good call.
All right.
The artifact is a koan. 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 Don't you call it a cone? It's much easier. The Zen cone. Koan. So it's something that ultimately is paradoxical.
Yeah.
But the paradox is the point, sort of. It's,
Well,
the thing that
we've
points.
we've been hovering around this paradox for quite some time. Here's one variation of it: the Zeitgeist. The Zeitgeist is, on the one hand, a potent element for which we need to plug into because this is the only key, right? But on the other hand, it is
Or the only lock, depending how you
right.
see it.
Yeah.
Artifact being the key.
Sure. But the other thing is that it is the bigger it is, the more volatile it is, and so the more
Right.
violent the response you can expect if you don't do it correctly, if you don't tread correctly. So it's
there's two sides.
incredibly
There's two sides to that.
incredibly difficult.
There's two sides to that because one experiencing the power of the Zeitgeist demands the artifact. So if you've truly experienced the Zeitgeist, you demand the artifact. If
The Zeitgeist is painful. The introduction of the artifact is painful. Both are conceived by the ego as punishment. Why would you punish yourself? That's the paradox. Like if you're
how to get
where
over
you're-
that
they-
bump, I guess.
Yeah, in the ego, it always bounces off. That's the key there. And the only way to overcome that is not by telling somebody something. That person has to overcome.
Well, that's what I mean. That's one way. That's probably the only way, or if not primary.
The only way, yes.
Yeah, it has to be a self-apparent, self-created response to the Zeitgeist.
Self does not mean one person, by the way. Self can mean a collective. It does not have to
Sure.
be. we're never
And
that.
this can involve networked communication, and just we all throw out whatever, you know.
This is my own personal bias, but I don't for a second believe that Buddhism came about because one person realized something and all of a sudden taught everybody. What I do think happened is that an emergent thought process appeared amongst the group that eventually culminated in a mythology of a single person who was picked to exemplify a particular narrative.
Mm-hmm.
So,
that story never could have taken root if people had not understood its value.
Mm-hmm. And so I believe the idea of the Buddha as an actual being and a mythological being.
Totally an aside.
Yeah, it came about much later, and not only that, but it also speaks of volumes to the way Buddhism is practiced even to this day. In that you don't necessarily have to adhere to any particular set of doctrines. You just have to keep going at it and see for yourself how, if at all, it's true, right? And so that's the genesis of it. So so even there, I don't being a Buddhist myself. I don't actually believe in a historical individual or something, and I think that would defeat the entire purpose of the whole point. To stick to that.
To focus on the individual.
Well, to stick to that as a historical thing, where it's clear that even the historical stories there don't reflect
because
anything but the ideal.
We need to get to the point of analogy, and the analogy has to become real in our life.
Yes.
And clinging on to a historical fact can actually inhibit that analogical transcendence up into the being.
And this also speaks to the way we approach Portal Mountain with the Grandmaster. Grandmaster sounds like some divine being sitting there overlording on things, right? Like to some extent, but that's a myth. That's literally a myth meant to evoke. We're dealing with an ego stack to begin with. So what do we want to put on top of the stack that one can reflect through? We want to put a kind of ego that is not an ego, hence the Grandmaster.
Right. And this is like the top of the stack, the top of the pyramid, if you will.
Which isn't the top.
Instead of, no matter where you find yourself, there's always something above, that being the Grandmaster. Right. Even if you are at literally the top of the ego stack.
And let's break it down even further. For the most practical purposes, the most secular purposes, what is the Grandmaster? Just a framework of meaning. To create meaning for meaningless words, like the soul, like the self, like the source, like all of those mythological terms that we've been using, right? It's just a method of binding them together into one coherent, meaningful statement, rather than a meaningless one. Or arbitrarily meaningless one, rather. A
non-obfuscated meta-narrative.
Not a trinket sold on the market. So, from that perspective, it's an how do you say it?
Anthropomorphize.
So, from that perspective, the Grandmaster is an anthropomorphized version of the model, in which the model itself is just words. But if you were to imagine somebody exemplifying that would be the Grandmaster.
Now, hold on. The Grandmaster does float mysteriously in the spirit world.
In the narrative mysterious world, which we have already tried to explain.
Floats beyond the horizon.
Yeah, it's a narrative. It is definitely a solipsistic narrative by design. And that solipsism isn't meant to evoke further solipsism, but rather point it out.
So, Shall we continue with the charts? Because we were gonna tie together
Well,
so many. We were thinking
Yes.
like, hey, let's
At this point, we
let's
are.
tie them all together.
At this point, we should
What-
move to here.
What haven't we pulled up?
At this point, we should move here because we're now honing in
The
on
ontological
the
matrix.
ontological matrix.
We
So
did pull this up already.
yeah, we did.
Okay.
So we were starting here. We said that the Grand Master lives here. We said that the religious leaders live here, and that the scientism has moved from here to here as a utility. So a lot is happening above the horizon in the narrative spectrum. In the narrative and so it's not spectrum, but layer. And all of it comes down to a head in this diagram where soundbite meets agent meets ego meets agent meets all of the things come together.
Right.
That would be our ontological matrix. And from this point on, we can say two things. We have members, we have agents flowing into it. We have disconnected mythology coming in from the market system. We have a unified mythology coming in from Portal Mountain mythology. It's all mythology, so let's not get too cranky over how it's laid out. And now we have a compare and contrast situation of what agency brings to the picture and what membership brings to the picture. Let's see. And what membership would bring to the picture.
Right.
So one of these things might look much
So-
more straightforward than the other.
Just quickly, we're talking about how people interact in society. In a shared medium, so we have an ontological matrix. It's happening in a space, shared
Society,
spaces.
family, themselves. I would actually straddle all of these. Even the relationship you have to yourself.
Sure.
Self-hate.
Right, and those can be taken through sound bites delivered either by one side or the other of the cognitive discrepancy window, which we've just been illuminating. One kind of mechanistic side, which we call the market machine, and its obfuscated meta-narrative, or from the polymorphic machine with its model meta-narrative, as we call it. Right? And
Right, which is self-repeating and
connected.
perpetual. Yeah, it always repeats itself in some way. Even if not with the same words, it will always say the same thing.
So speaking to somebody who hasn't really encountered that kind of stuff, it's gonna seem, it would seem very weird, very strange. Like, what do you mean there's more to life than this kind of computational interaction with each other, where I give something and I get something in return, or
Well,
whatever?
yeah, that's a fair point, because if you look at the last couple of hundred years, humanity has found itself in a situation where computation serves us very well.
And it survives us. We survive because of that. If I go kill,
allows us
kill
to
this
neglect-
animal,
It allows
whatever.
us to defer the acts of our neglect much further.
There's again, okay, this fine point that
Sorry.
that even though we do these behaviors, there's something more to it. There's something more to it, which is our kind of our presence in the moment, which changes the whole flavor of the interaction of the machine. It changes the entire flavor of the machine to be from what we call a difference between the market machine, which is a cold binary distribution of resources, punishment and reward, and what we call the polymorphic machine, which is much more
Context aware.
flexible, natural, context aware, in this kind of abundance mindset and this gift economy type ideas where those things come from. You cannot rationally explain them. And in both systems, you will have people doing kind of calculated machine-like encounters and exchanges, but there's something very special in the polymorphic machine, which is that context awareness in which there's a bigger picture to the soundbite, to the interaction.
In that
something is it's holistically connected, and that is the part that'd be very difficult to describe to anybody.
What the polymorphic machine will do, which the market machine will have an extremely hard time with, is to adjust to the circumstance. The market machine works through value accounting. It will try to normalize everything into monetary or a currency.
Right.
And it would use that currency to determine the yay or nay based on the given context.
Right.
Whereas the polymorphic machine excludes compensation as a means of valid interaction. The interaction is valid based on the circumstance rather than based on financial plans.
There's this weird faith thing that happens in the polymorphic machine, in that
it's exclusive to the moment.
you know that if demands are supplied, that everybody will be happy. But in your individual calculation, you're giving something up. And you don't know if it's going to return
Not
to you.
for a reward either.
You don't know if it's going to return. You just know that you're giving it up because the health of the overall is coming up. And you have faith that if you have a demand,
it will be met the same way.
It will be met. And this is the loop connection that I think is
missing.
Not described. I haven't seen it described. It needs to be described, because that's what that faith loop connection, that when you demand, it will be supplied because you're part of something bigger.
Yeah, and that's the entire premise of agile economics. It's to set up a structural way to facilitate that particular nuance, to
Right.
ensure that demands can be made and moved through the proper routes,
Now-
to have suppliers voluntarily provide.
The first thing we need to do in modern context is say, okay, this isn't communism, it's not socialism, it's not freeloaders can get whatever they want.
No,
What you
membership
ha-
entails
and
something different.
The way that we have structured our approach is that whenever you have this polymorphic economy structure, it's within a shell corporation. In other words,
Protected.
it's protected from the outside exploiters who would come in and take what
Profits.
bounty is available.
Who would take it for profits?
So, in other words, the people within that shell have to have some type of real communion with each other.
Right. You cannot, if you're with the means to provide, your membership is the thing that prevents the exploitation to begin with.
Right.
Because a provider without membership is only to be traded with, if you will.
Right.
In that they already are trying to recoup market gains.
Yes,
not
they're getting
otherwise.
they're getting their own because they've already
And if that be the case, that's fine, but it has its own
Right.
structure.
So, in other words, we need to be able to protect participants and guests within this corporate shell from exploitation of these types of corporations and the outside world, if you will.
Yeah.
And we have many of these bubbles coming up everywhere, and then they kind of bubble together and pack together into what we call the guild. And this is like the meta narrative that holds together, like
Yeah.
the not the new world order, but the guild system structure globally.
Yeah, it doesn't order the world per se, because there are many institutions, there are many corporations that would be involved. Their binding factor would be will be effectively the constraints of the guild, in that they will simply not allow themselves to venture into particular activities. That constraint is the fundamental basis on which the shelter is built. Because of this constraint, that is the quote-unquote safety net that is provided. And anybody
So-
failing on those constraints cannot be
So you're saying
fundamentally part of it.
a supplier within the system is tied into the guild, not into the market, into the polymorphic machine, not into the market machine.
They still have their obligations to the market to be correct, so that the shelter is maintained, the shield is maintained,
Mhm.
so that no legal action can be taken place. So they have to be quite straightforward in that sense, but they
Right.
can't take the repercussions of that
Okay,
further
this makes
in.
me think of something maybe important that I don't know if we've talked about it, but a a corporation operating within this guild shelter can have two faces: one towards the guild itself, which is a different interaction, and one towards the outer world.
And by
which
face
is
we
a
don't
trade.
mean deception. This is not a deceptive tactic. It's all
Interface.
it's all clear. It's all in the open. It's
Yeah.
all clear.
I mean interface, yeah, nothing shady or anything. But when interacting, when this corporation interacts outside of the shell for quote unquote profit, the profit be fed back into the guild within the shell.
Well, that's the whole point of taking one's corporation into the guild to begin with. Like, if you're not doing that, why do you need to?
Right,
Like,
and,
don't
this
bother.
is why certain corporations should be supported and propelled, because it propels the guild. And I'm having this
And we're
vision.
also not against the corporate landscape, if you will, in a fundamental sense because of that. Which is like a lot of our contemporaries, if you will always rail on this problem and always go with the route of dismantle the whole damn thing.
Against the corporation.
Cannot do it.
No, we're interfacing. So this vision that that's kind of erupting is of profit being translated into the guild.
Yeah, like
So to grow
how
the
do you-
guild itself.
How do you
right?
how do you turn useless money into something that all members like, and you see a supply and you see a demand for something.
So
So you take all that useless money and create something useful for the demand
Right.
for that demand.
like there's a term potlatch, and I forget exactly what it's used, but it's this kind of idea, I think, as I recall, to funnel money into like a community type.
I don't
type
want.
idea.
I am strongly against money being the binding mechanism
Of
for
course.
for transactions because
Of
it
course.
it launders and it obfuscates.
Of course.
So it's by definition part of the problem.
Now, it's also the setup of all the power of the economy currently of the market machine. It's all set up
So
on that
this
power.
is what the institution is really
So-
for, is to translate that to
exactly.
how do you translate
So we're not
that
on
power?
we're on the same page.
Yes. So this is what why there's two layers. Why there's not a just corporation layer, but there's an institution layer above that. The institutional layer is entirely uninterest cannot be by definition interested in profit. Like that is not its goal or quest or anything, but it's played out by a corporation anyway.
Mhm.
So, what is its job?
Yes.
Its
Okay.
job is to take all of the all of the accounting from the shelter, from the outside, and transform it into the list of supplies that
Right, that are demanded.
that is being demanded.
And that's
somehow.
what I was going to say. There is demand nonetheless, which can be,
Yeah. So this is
pulled-
the
pulled
job
in.
of the trade guild. The job of the trade guild is to figure out how to transform useless finances from the outside to useful things
right.
on the inside.
Right. And my intuition here is that it's basically to facilitate the reversal of the commodification of all life.
Well, that's the end result. Yes. because
so funnel money into that, basically.
It is a reversal of the process in that you stop thinking in terms of finances. You think primarily in terms of demands, and finances become an extrinsic tool to navigate that landscape as an extra thing. You don't immediately go out to say who can finance this. You immediately go, who has what I need? And if that doesn't exist, well, how can that be obtained? And that's when the conversation about obtaining from extrinsic places can take place.
The institution collects demand, and I think facilitates
institutions. It's a collective element.
Both.
It's not a centralized entity. There are corporations acting as institutions.
Okay, so we're getting into what Eon is probably interested in today in the lobby. But we can say the institution
As a collective term, sure.
We can, just as we can say the guild.
Yeah. So there's the institute.
So,
which is a collection of institutions.
I think that let's just say, so the institute has its work cut out for it. In that, the commodification of all life has hollowed and scraped out every last thing out of us in a way, out into fairyland.
Yeah, and now it's having to sit there and hear the cry.
Hear the cry and say, okay, start from the bottom. Like, you're missing this, you're missing that, you're missing that. This layer.
No, not you. What's missing here? Let's build it. Not you. That's the system talking. It's very sorry. I don't think you meant it.
I'm sure you get my sentiment.
No, you didn't mean it that way, but I wanted to jump in just because it sounds that way.
Yeah.
The system will always blame you, and then take away your ability to respond.
I meant that in a completely empathetic way.
Yeah, in this case, this is not. You're not the blame. This is just your ability to respond to it. So we're reversing that part.
So we're missing this, we're missing that, we're missing that. Let's put a different pronoun in there.
Yeah, so the institution's job is to go, okay.
But that's what I mean.
There's
the work
all
is
these
cut out.
demands.
We have the chronology of
Right. Any institution right now would start absolutely from the bottom.
Yeah.
Sure.
That's what I mean. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's starting at the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
So, to even get like the mindset going.
So like the proper institution should have demand, like a massive wall of demand, just ready to go.
Oh yeah, like it's already there, and that comes through by definition through the zeitgeist. The zeitgeist is the negative space of information that says to the guild, do this, this is the demand, this is the demand. The zeitgeist dictates demand.
So the institution,
it's a completely impersonal process.
The institution is bound to the zeitgeist.
To that degree, yes.
At least initially,
it's constrained by a guild dynamic structure. So, on the one hand side, the demands that come through are stipulated by the zeitgeist, but the way it operates, the way it functions, is not stipulated.
The institute
isn't
isn't just there crying pain. It's reasserting the guild.
Yeah, a different DNA, if you will, for social interaction.
Right.
So yeah.
Okay.
That is in line.
Good.
Break.
Yeah, sure. Sound good? We is back. Guess who back? Back again.
It's not a symbol. I'm just doing this.
We is back. West side.
Where?
He's trying to.
Which side?
You're trying to pose.
My
the
fingers
west,
are like this.
the west and the east at once. Oh my god. So yes, we have this this ontological matrix, this kind of battle, if you will, of
Sound bites.
existence of sound bites on either side, quote unquote. Some sound bites which are interpreted through this lens of membership, in which everything is a whole on, and a soundbite isn't just a calculated piece of code you shove into a machine, but it automatically is taken in context and exploded and unfurled. So you've got two sides, one which is doing that, one which is not. The one that's not produces the market machine. The one that is doing that produces the polymorphic machine, which is able to adapt to soundbite meaning and analogize soundbites and create a much a bigger picture, if you will.
Holistic one.
And so we have this this ontological matrix, which is an idea of where we are all kind of interacting in shared media, throwing these sound bites at each other, and all manner of civilization are happening. Every interaction you can possibly imagine under the sun. Some are being taken as the market machine interaction, in which it's very
Transactional.
rigid, transactional, and some of these interactions taken through the polymorphic route, in which
Analogous.
through context and analogy, things are potentially exploded out
An allegory.
into meaning much bigger than just the little context itself, which is very important because we are much more bigger than just a machine slotting into different things. So we've got the situation of these shared media, in which these sound bites are being projected and shot at each other and utilized. And what
I would
are
classify these two sides as literate and illiterate.
which we have done, correct? And we are dropping artifacts, special artifact into this. And what are we doing? What is our organization exactly? So we Portal Mountain.
How is our
ma-
agency different in this matrix than the other agents?
There are many other groups out there, out on the internet, out in the world, who are doing similar things to this, who understand this and feel this deeply, who want to create shared economies and gift economies and like these meanings, these interactions within the ontological matrix that are much
So
more
the
meaningful to the individual.
So the question is how are they failing to integrate into this ontological
How are they
matrix?
failing, and what are we doing?
Yeah.
What are we doing? What are we proposing?
Why would that be any
What are we
different?
proposing here? What are we
So-
injecting into this?
So I think one of the first elements of that could raise eyebrows, but at the same time could sort of illuminate why it's structured that way, is this corporate shelter.
Raise or lower eyebrows, depending on.
Yeah. So the idea behind it being there being a corporate shelter to begin with has to do with the fact that we don't want the concept of Portal Mountain to seem like a jarring contrast to the ongoing social structure.
Like something
Because-
so different. Oh, you're just a bunch of hippies
Right.
sharing, and how do you give everything away and
That,
la la la.
that has to do with exactly that, having no desire to deal with the
No.
frivolousness
We are
of,
straight-
of trying to
We're a
accomplish.
straight business. We have a corporate shell. It looks exactly like a corporation.
And look, it doesn't just look like a corporation; it functions like one. In that, legally speaking, from the perspective of the ongoing world, you're not in a different group. You're not in some different crazy cult. You're not nothing about you will be constituted any goddamn difference.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're not separated and wedged between everybody you know and everything you've done, just because all of a sudden you felt
Okay.
that
Yeah,
the
yeah,
zeitgeist
yeah.
has some kind of meaning to you.
So I'm kind of reminded of like communist communes or whatever you call it. You know, like oh, you're like how would you feel in capitalist society if you knew somebody who is part of a like a factory where you live in the factory or something.
Yeah,
With everybody, all the other workers.
all
you
of
live.
these questions.
How would you feel about that?
Yeah, like all of these questions, we're basically are deliberately sidestepping them because these are not the poignant points to deal with. The poignant points to deal with are why such structures materialize to begin with, and which happens through the projection of actual human beings who are, yeah,
Right.
there but not there. So the question is not about how do we get rid of something, but more like how do we incorporate. Interesting word there, right? Incorporate the rest of the world in such a way that isn't hostile to the premise to begin with.
Incorporate.
Which doesn't involve
By the rest of the world, you mean this the holonic sense, like this the context and something bigger pictures.
something that
type thing.
everybody actually has an inkling to. Whether or not they react violently or not to it is a different story.
Right.
Part of the reason why these systems keep coming up is really because the problem is perpetual, right? And it has varying qualities of being classified one way or another.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like it's a new problem to deal with. It's more like we haven't been able to put a handle on how to deal with the problem to begin with, and most of that has to do with the adversarial element of trying to grind ego versus ego to resolve the problem, which perpetuates the problem to begin with.
Right. This feeling of disconnection between each other, this sympathetic stance.
You're right. It precludes a lot of solutions that see others as yourself immediately, because if on any wedge issue, there's the us and then there's the them.
Right.
And how can the them be us?
And it's not just not only an
Language doesn't allow it. They're a them. We're an
not,
us.
Not only an innate thing to have otherness, but it's actually exploited and leveraged and amplified that there are others through these wedge issues.
The problem isn't that it materialized, because right back to teeth and claws, it would materialize and dissipate into the context, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because you couldn't spend a lot of time thinking about your future problems. You'd be too dead to deal with them, since you haven't taken care of your current problems, right? A situation we've allowed a lot of
Aren't we lucky?
time to materialize between action and reaction. That being part of the problem, the space and time gap that we've created for ourselves in the representational. But
Yeah.
without that space and time gap, these qualities of ours are fundamentally necessary. It's only in the context of the provided space-time delay that these qualities become exploitable, right? We don't have a problem with this if we don't have the time to spend on creating a totalitarian regime to begin with. Nobody needs to care about it if it's impossible to create.
I was gonna mention, I'm a bit lost in this, where you're going with that, but I was gonna mention, as the commodification of all life, from the bottom, right away, you got the walled city and all this, you don't have to worry about the lions attacking you or anything like that. You've got the food coming in. So at the base level, you are being raised up into a system which wants you to survive to the bare minimum. It wants you to barely minimally survive so that the system itself doesn't die. It doesn't want you to thrive or grow or anything, but you're not going to die. So that gives us time.
That's you're actually are interpreting what I'm saying properly. The time gap we've given ourselves between an act and its reaction to us allows us to exist in a situation where we can create acts and acts and acts and acts and acts and acts and acts that build up for the future that come crumbling down.
Sure.
But they do not affect the person immediately, and so without that immediate repercussion, the person, it becomes clear that you can act in bizarre ways.
And so that's a description of the breakaway civilization, the commodification of all life, and the zeitgeist pushing to the limit, literally the limit, where everything is scooped and hollowed out of the soul. It's at the very limit.
So referring back to the time delay, why it's scooped back and scooped out and everything like that, the immediate reaction of the world does not pertain to you. You have no feedback. Without the feedback, you have no resonating, ongoing relationship with the world around you. You're disconnected from it. Shit can come back to you years after the fact, and all of a sudden it's a surprise. Happens to us all now, doesn't it?
Yep.
And and so
it is very weird.
The loss of ability to control your destiny, the loss of the ability to ties into that immediately. The gap sparks concern for the future, because now that your actions
but an ungrounded concern, because we don't actually know what could possibly be wrong because we're disconnected from
and we
it
don't know, like, for example, you could take advantage of somebody and they will forgive you. You could take advantage of somebody, they're gonna come back and kill you. Look, all of these delays, they cause such a clusterfuck of uncertainty that is absolutely impossible to recuperate after the fact.
You.
Well, you know what I mean. Like, the way I've been talking to you over the years, and if I talk to like that to somebody else, like, what's the difference? That's a big difference.
You called me a Nazi.
I know, right? I just did that in this episode.
Yeah.
So yeah,
due to my trolling nature.
Well, speaking to the anti-troll here. They're fun.
Yeah.
No, please do explain yourself. I'd love to hear you further.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the gap speaks to the points that Zumi raised, actually. His exploration of the alphabet was the main reason for this thought process for me.
Well, that's what allowed the disconnection, the externalization of memory.
Right. Writing coincides with the reduction of brain matter in our species.
I've never heard him bring that up, but yes.
Yeah, so it means that we've offloaded so much onto the environments to the point of where our own thoughts are resonating back to us from the environment, and they're not connected to the environment to begin with. So it becomes a really vicious cycle.
Echo chamber.
Yeah.
Right. And this gets back to, like, okay, what is the original problem? What's the real problem? We don't have access to feedback through the self, through the body. So and this is what we're talking about with the cognitive window and all that, to come back to a self-reference ability and not have this free-floating virtual reality.
So to piggyback on Zumi's words a little bit, what happened is that we have externalized our memory. And by externalizing our memory, we no longer own. We are no longer remembering the things that we remember anymore, right? We remember things that have been written down. So, or rather, it's not that we remember the things that were written down. We trust the memories of the written down things more than our cognitive capacity for remembering.
And even memory isn't perfect and chunked and all that, which we brought up.
Sure, and it's also subject to interpretation when it's written
Mm-hmm.
down. So the problem, as far as I can
recalled.
tell, this is just my assessment, is that we've written so much out to the point of where we forgot to let the world inform us. We don't know how to let the world inform us of what's happening. We can only look at the signpost left of past people to give us that information. And those bits and pieces of information are also disconnected from the current context because they were written in their previous context.
Sure.
And so we're
Like,
also relying on our interpretation after the fact.
And past interpretations from these people.
And so this is the problem I have with citing people. Sure, I can cite people with great ideas, which is why I mention Darren Allen all the time. Douglas Hofstadter a little bit less, but is also a very important person. Buddhist scripture, blah, 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 blah. A lot of that is relevant. And but yeah, like the fundamental problem is that we are not internalizing anything anymore. We're not growing within ourselves. We rely on external media to record, right? We don't. Why? Let's. Why
This
am I?
is the
Why am I
virtual-
seeing this as a problem?
This is the virtual reality.
If we are not recording, if we are not the ones recording, the recordings that are given to us are already prefabricated with meaning, with intent, with whatever else is laced into the presentation. We are forbidden
That's
from
important.
making our own internalized version of these things, and as soon as we do, we're ridiculed for having an internalized version that doesn't actually
Ridicule is
looked at.
is irrelevant.
Ridicule is a
so-
punishment by the system for daring to step outside of the
Yes,
narrative.
you're right. You're right that these artifacts, these sound bites, all come with their own inherent ontology. It's just, it comes with it. It tries to force itself on you. But this isn't a problem for people who can navigate the cognitive window.
I'm not saying it is. I'm not saying it is a problem.
That's just what I want to come back to that and say,
The-
yes, the virtual world is crazy, and the virtual world says the virtual
So-
world is primary, but we don't have to listen to that.
So this is This would be the difference between using the soundbite as your feedback mechanism versus observation as the actual
Right.
feedback mechanism.
That's what I want to get to.
Right. So this is the world we're describing. If you were to be trapped inside the soundbite world and only that world and perpetuating that world.
Right.
So yeah.
And this is like the Huxleyan thing of information overload too, where there's just
Huxley and Orwell are two sides of a coin. On the one hand side, you have the authoritarian regime decimating the truthfulness of information. On the flip side, you have drugs and intervention to ensure that the narrative, whatever solipsistic narrative you're carrying, is at least somewhat aligned back to the market production machine, right? So that it's recuperated in terms of selling you this trinket versus that trinket.
I guess I wanted to bring them into this discussion, but from what I understand, Huxley often said that information overload, it doesn't even matter if the truth is spoken, because there's so much narrative.
I don't know anything about that point of Huxley. I see Huxley primarily as the self-medicating situation.
Right.
The problem is
pleasure side.
I don't read. I haven't read their material.
No, we just like to
specifically.
read it.
I'll admit I'm mostly in the perspective from having seen most of his, mostly from his criticisms. But
Right?
the picture that does emerge is that, yeah, it's all self-medicated kind of stuff, in which the zeitgeist causes a feeling of desperation, and without providing a real solution, it provides a bunch of pacifying drugs to deal with the pain, but not with the reason for that pain.
Right.
So you pacify yourself.
So here's like a kind of paraphrase quote that people would say, juxtaposing Huxley with
Orwell.
Orwell. In the Orwell system, books would be banned. Anything that's wrong think would be shut out of the system. In a Huxleyan system, there's so much so much that you would never know even what is right
Exactly,
or wrong.
exactly.
You're not
You're given everything.
Yeah.
You're given everything,
Yeah.
and also you're given the drugs to pacify yourself. So it doesn't matter what's right or wrong. You're just a hippie.
I know it.
But no, you see what I mean? Like, there's either way, like, the effect is the same.
As he licks his
You
drug.
have no voice. You're a cog in the machine, and ultimately, it doesn't matter whether your anxiety comes from being hunted down by the authorities or by your own peers who are eating themselves alive. What's the difference? Ultimately, it's if you're in the dumps, you're living the
Actually,
exact same shitty life.
I think I see the reflection here of the authoritarian totalitarian dichotomy that we've been. That
It's
I've been
probably
kind of
hitting
in-
on objectivistic and solipsistic. I'm pretty sure they're both one of the other.
Can we connect those? Because just quickly through history, people can identify whether you're a ruler with an iron fist or whether you are leading through like some kind of like shared ideology.
Authoritarian would be solipsistic.
You're leading through a shared delusion, if you will, that you're all righteous and getting rid of the wrong and the bad of society. Purifying, but the thing is, everybody believes it literally. Like more than let's say half the population or less believes it fundamentally, like thumpingness. So a difference between those. So in the authoritarian, everyone's afraid of the power of the one in authority. When that system becomes unopposed, the iron gauntlet becomes a velvet glove, because he realizes his power doesn't need to be anymore. But in the totalitarian system, when it becomes unopposed, shit hits the fan because everybody believes that shit must be cleansed, and now there's nothing stopping us, and it fucking goes even worse than it ever could be.
Right. So this brings me to trying to wedge the idea of objectivism dealing with the reality of things and solipsism dealing with the morality of things. Because
Right.
authoritarian, if I were to qualify this here, I would put authoritarian as the solipsistic endeavor, right? Believe us or else. And the objectivist into the
Okay.
Totalitarian.
Something more
as in,
crystallized.
our science tells us
Yes.
you are a degenerate.
Crystallized into reality.
Right.
Shared reality crystallized.
Right.
Correct. Yeah.
Right.
And
That's
that's
why.
much more dangerous.
It's extreme.
And I think that's what we're dealing with these days. Is,
Oh, yeah.
is that kind of a
Objectivism
type of
is
system. Right.
is more volatile than subjectivism has ever been, or solipsism rather.
Right.
Because solipsism still wound up dealing with morality. truth value based on action or inaction in general, versus truth value based in existent things or non-existent. And if you don't deem things to exist, then you know, how do you respect something you don't think is there? How do you interact with something that you don't believe is there? How do you you can't.
Right.
At
You
worst,
mean with the objectivist
yeah, at
side?
worst, you become an arrogant prick. But
Mm.
that worst also means you probably can and will go through the process of purification to eliminate the
The scapegoat.
non-rational elements of your worldview.
Right. Yeah, and so this is what we're dealing with. Like, this is what's coming. I think we're in this world right now, and
Are you being eliminated?
a lot of people, we're all being eliminated. Every one of us, last one of us, is being eliminated. We're in this world, and people are saying, you know,
You should be in a concentration camp.
they're saying that. Also, they're saying the temperature is going to rise this X much. You know, Fukushima keeps putting this shit into the ocean. You know, this many species are dying every day. Literally, number of species died every day, going extinct, and all this kind of stuff. And we're here arguing over the topic du jour, whatever like kind of sweeps us all in these mass things. But no, how do we get out of these cycles of being manipulated based on our fears of what's going to happen to the planet and all that?
Some
And
dream.
actually get together and
We've already qualified all of these things as dreams.
like companies are polluting the shit out of everything everywhere due to profit and short-term gain, and this is the system structure that we deal with, right? So we're pointing towards some kind of like a bubbling up of these guild structures that can create something different, fundamentally different, sheltered from the system itself, and actually able to thrive and grow in federation with other bubbles, right? Or however you will, into creating a voice, a real voice, right? That's what I want to look at, that as being different completely from the fear mongering of and you know the Greta who is on point. Greta's on point, right? She doesn't have a solution though. She's not the one to provide
her solution
solutions.
is to talk.
She is the demand, saying this shit is fucked up. Let's deal with the demand and let's provide the solution.
The only comment I have about the Greta story is that unfortunately her mindset is in the right place. The problem being she was recouped by the media to be a symbol, and because she's now just a symbol,
Right.
the effect of her voice is nullified.
We don't have a way of dealing with that kind of demand.
I can't claim that it's nullified, but I'm sure if you look at the side effects of everything, you can see that it's actually just a method of swallowing up that voice and do nothing about it.
Because we don't have a way of dealing with that kind of demand. This is a zeitgeist demand that just bubbles up.
And it has no profit associated to it.
Right.
So it's not a market demand. And
Power
it will
to
never
her.
will
Power
be.
to her for trying.
Identifying.
Right. So she becomes a symbol for that. That's fine. This is a demand bubbling up, and we don't have a coherent way yet.
Yeah.
Of supplying
So we're saying
that
the same
demand.
thing. We're disappointed in the fact that it became a symbol rather than anything else. Because as a symbol, you can take it down, write it down in a book, close the book, put it on the shelf, and not give a fuck about it for whatever reasons.
Right.
That's what I mean about it being disappointing. As soon as you've given a voice to somebody on the media,
Right.
that's all they are.
So, do a lot of people know that it's not up to some faraway institution or company or corporation or government to fix this, but that something has to bubble up from amongst the people? Is that...
No, I don't think it's a very well understood point. I mean, I think it's intuitively understood.
In activist circles, I think there's some intuition
it's
there.
intuitively understood, but all objectivist reasoning say that this is not possible.
Because we can learn from experience in that every time we have put our demands to the corporation and government, it's been
failing.
recuperated. And it's become symbolized and twisted and then projected down against us.
The actual demand, yeah.
Right.
The demand is valueless.
Right. So...
Right. There is a great way to see where the problem is happening. What the demand is, the Zeitgeist demand, it is seen as valueless to the market, and because of it
Right.
being valueless to the market cannot and will not attempt to actually
it's like because
restructure itself around it.
How do you make a profit from that?
You can't, so it becomes antithetical to its operational
Right.
status.
And yet here we are careening towards oblivion with seemingly no brakes available.
Because we cannot stop the market. Like, there's no brakes. Yeah.
And yeah, so this is our little solution. A
All right.
corporate shell. A corporate shell. I gotta take a break though.
Me too.
You know, you too. Good. We'll be right back.
It's interesting that the system can never, ever exist without causing the Zeitgeist.
Correct. Yeah.
And on top of that, right? And on top of that, it can never, ever give it up. And so, because of that, because the system can never give up the zeitgeist. It is, by definition,
The zeitgeist is the shadow of the system.
yes.
That's what you mean, I think.
Well, the ego is the shadow of the system, and the zeitgeist is the shadow of the ego. So
Sure.
It's a layer removed. But
Cool.
what I'm trying to say is that it is impossible to use anything that the system provides as a mechanism of escaping it. As a mechanism of
Right.
escaping its reward and punishment. As a
Right.
mechanism of dealing with
Mhm.
it itself. Because the system demands the conflict
Even
between
if-
it
even-
and yourself.
Even if you go to the other side or whatever.
Mhm. You will always. It is always going to be fundamentally conflicted.
And so, this point, like we were bringing up,
So,
like with Greta and the demands and all that, and how the system creates a symbol out of Greta and the symbol out of the demand, and then recuperates that and says, "Oh, this is bad, this is good."
The symbol can be
Depending on what
alleviated by
side you
buying
are.
the following products.
Right? And the problem is, all of this is dealt with in the dream, in a dream state or sense. It will never come back to the self-realization, self-actualization
We've caused the dream to begin with.
of that I am moment to moment doing the dream. I am dreaming. I accept this symbol into my stack and calculate it like a machine. And that is the problem, quote unquote.
The problem. Well, yes. So we've defined the problem as the lack of faith. We've defined the problem as the perpetual cycle of sound biting in the moment in favor of the dream.
Right?
So these are all elements that describe the problem.
Mm-hmm.
And we've touched a little bit on what it looks like to have a guild shield, if you will, within the ontological matrix. So why don't we start to disseminate how the ontological matrix changes from within the confines of the
Okay.
shelter versus its outside counterparts. And this is where the discussion of guild dynamics is really fruitful. Because it eliminates the structure
Okay.
of what's happening inside this little bubble.
Illuminate. And so the artifact being presented and maybe recognized and spreading, if you will.
Well, I kind of wanted to go about this as initially a series of realization.
Okay.
Starting off from the faith bootstrap. With the faith bootstrap allowing the fact that there's a moment to be real, the fact that there's a sound bite to be real, the fact that you have to take the time and space to see feedback and
Mhm.
observe it, all
Okay.
of these things to be taken on faith to be real,
So
and so on.
we're back to last meeting's topic, which is the faith bootstrap, which is in short summary that and
Give
this,
it space.
this doesn't matter if even somebody else is telling you to try something out. Let's say you encounter a problem and your brain, using analogy, thinks that it's encountered something similar in another domain, completely like unrelated. Like
You've solved a familial problem and
just-
you're dealing with an animal.
you somehow somehow, I don't know, I was thinking of like playing pool or something, like shooting a ball into a hole, and it's like you've played pool before,
Golf and pool.
but have you played golf or whatever? Yeah. And then right, and you're like, okay, no one's telling me how to play golf. This is a self thing that I know how to put balls into holes. It's basically sports. Right?
I'm
So-
just sportsing here.
Playing sports ball, if you will. So, without anybody telling you, you can, on faith, construct a model in the moment, which you will utilize
Right.
to cause the ball to go into a
Right.
hole.
You don't need to have a bunch of
Nobody
people
has to tell
confirming
you.
you.
Nobody's even telling you this, right? So let's expand that out to where somebody is telling you that, and you have to be like, okay, I've played pool and now,
Well,
I
at
can
that
understand.
point is like they can tell you things like, in pool you use this technique, right? Well, this is how this technique translates to the golf ball, right? They can actually inform you of that,
Right.
and you can take your personal experience of shooting pool, understand what they're talking about in terms of positioning, whatever, and translate that to your own understanding
Right.
of doing it a different way.
Mm-hmm. Like when you slice the golf ball, you're actually putting a rightward spin on it to cause it to go to the right. Or is that a hook? That's a hook. Anyways, you get the idea, right? Same dynamics you can translate. But the point is, in faith, you're taking a model and applying it to reality because you're literally sitting there in front of a ball.
You're making an
ready,
analogy.
You are ready to interact with a ball right now with a tool.
Yeah, but the internal understanding and reality of that is coming from a completely different place, which forces you to make an analogy about this space and how to transform all of that knowledge into this situation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but the point is to at least get a. So you're going into an unknown, so you don't have a model ready for this. So you're using analogy. This is what the brain is,
Prime for.
somehow we've been made to, through evolution or whatever, however um, to do this kind of calculation. It's natural to us.
Mm-hmm.
So we take our intuition on faith by definition almost. Intuition comes into you unquestioned because you feel it as a part of yourself. Now, when somebody else provides a model, there's a barrier blockage potentially, and rightfully so, because they could be telling you wrong information. And you yourself could be telling you wrong information, right? So there also that should be cautious whenever you're in an unknown domain.
Well, this is why the dream cannot have primacy. Because your own information can be wrong. How will you be flexible enough to feedback into yourself
Right.
that the information you have is wrong?
Exactly. Yes, because if you assume that you are always right when you try this new thing, and you just keep hitting the ball,
And by assume
it
I
keeps
don't
going
mean
the wrong
explicitly.
way, like the golf ball keeps going the wrong way, it never. But you're so sure that pool translates the way that you think it does to golf, and you'll never change. What happens?
You become a shitty golf player
You're a machine.
and a shitty golf player.
Yes.
which is which is basically what most machines are. Shitty golf players.
Of course.
But yeah, like that's the
Right. So the faith bootstrap. This again, like the last meeting, we went
Yeah.
over this like big time.
So what does faith bootstrap mean in the context of an ontological matrix? What it means is that you have members of that faith, if you will. This is again an analogy, or a metaphor. All share in the same matrix.
Right.
Hence, its kind of importance in that scenario. So what you can identify there is agencies with faith bootstrap applied. So that's the mechanical way of looking at it. And what does that membership mean? Well, just going through guild dynamics itself, membership in the guild already constitutes 3 guilds immediately, which are the fundamental guilds, membership
Right.
being one.
Okay.
The access to your network, aka other members.
So in the context of
and the mediation
And the mediation.
and mediation that you all share,
Right.
your common
which is
root.
like protocols, the glue that the understandings of how to do things
the
together.
the things that allow you to call yourselves members of the one thing.
Composed of protocol sound bites.
Exactly. So that inherent structure is the seed that we were discussing, and from there it essentially grows into a divergent system within of a network of appearing and disappearing agencies who are members. And this ephemerality is recognized by memberships
Ephemerality. Is that a major distinction between the other stack? Because
Yeah.
egos don't stop existing.
Exactly.
So ephemerality.
Agents replace egos. I mean, egos replace agents to supplant themselves.
So ephemerality is it's a distinguishing feature of the
Yeah.
lower side of this chart.
Members will appear and disappear within the ontological matrix, and they will appear as agencies to the other side, so they won't be able to distinguish it. That appearance and disappearance does not constitute of people appearing and disappearing. It just constitutes of people walking through their life in different stages. So at one point, an individual can appear in a role and then disappear from it, and then another individual.
The role being a fulfilling of a demand. So supply comes along.
Whatever the story is.
I can do that.
Yeah.
I see somebody's got a story and they need help. Boom, it's done.
The fulfillment, exactly. So that's the voluntary basis of it. And it's not very different from what you would imagine yourself living as a free person.
The problem is, so what lets that person live and exist, instead of being a transactional monetary based thing, like I have to make this much per month, so I need to make that on the market income, or I'll die. So, but other people may be feeling like, okay, I'm within this corporate shell we're talking about. I know that my demands are going to be met. So dying that's not one of the options. But to equalize my benefit, like let's even say you assume income and all that.
I have shit I can do.
Right, like...
And I like doing this stuff.
I do my job, like, I don't know. This is the weird thing, though, where how it's sound bites can sound the same on both sides, right? It can still sound like, okay, I know how to do that, and the market pays me, quote-unquote, this much amount, but I'm part of this system, at least in one domain of my understanding and existence, I'm part of a guild that has this shell. I'm part of this shell guild.
The difference here,
right? We're talking about working for a company, right?
Yep.
So we work for our normal companies. We also work for a guild. Isn't that what it is? A dual corporate working arrangement?
Yeah,
that's what it's going to look like. Is it? Am I?
No, you're right. You're right.
And that's going to be weird too.
And there's two images to
people will be like, oh, you're part of a gypsy guild or something or whatever.
There's a lot to juggle in the situation, because on the one side you have an ego stack, which is burling down ever faster.
Yeah.
That's the one outlook. On the other hand, you have
pushing down through the state. And
on the other one, you have that pumpkin image where everything is flattened out, and you still have reward and punishment. That doesn't go away, because nature is somewhat of a bitch.
Yeah.
But the difference is that the elimination of ego from the picture, in that only nature supplies reward and punishment, versus the up top ego pushing down and grinding you to the bottom of the stack, saying what the fuck.
There's a weird phenomenon here in that we have access to multiple streams of quote-unquote income as a being, and it's kind of like some is through the state, through this weird thing, and the other is through just kind of nature existing.
Which is being eliminated
which could be as much as peer-to-peer, we know each other.
No, but that's this thing that's being pushed
there's
down.
Community, they have apples on their tree, and there's too many, and whatever, they're just spreading, or everybody can have apples.
Yep.
Whatever happens.
The kind of interaction that's being shunned out.
Including all kinds of technical resources, though. Like, we can do a lot technically for each other. Like, even doing a live stream, which I put on, you don't know how to technically do that. You don't have the software. You're not sure of, like, what all this entails, right?
For now.
So, I'm sure you've got enough intuition you could dive right into it by now, yeah?
No, I didn't choose to, yeah.
For sure.
No, you're right. You're right. That
but it's just, that's free.
That's actually,
this
is a great point, actually, in that the guild does not assume that everybody has to be competent in everything. The guild does not
Right.
assume that, in that it takes it for granted that the competency you lack can be supplied elsewhere. Just in general, because people are different.
Can and is. Yep.
Well, the
Recurring situations like this, where we
that
know.
requires actual bringing together of the
Which
of
is
the
an
whole.
important point, a contextual point. That it's all talk and no action. That's
Yeah,
what everybody
it's when the
complains
whole-
about. Everybody complains about this philosophy shit. It's all talk, no action. But it is
You still-
action. I mean,
you
we are
still-
recording to YouTube and live streaming and
Well,
transcribing
we need a threshold.
and have community, right? And what is the next threshold that
The
we
threshold is enough.
What threshold are we going
people
towards
for
right
it to
now?
be a realistic momentum.
What is like we have people, we have a lobby, we have a network of chats and all this. That I'm just asking.
mean-
I'm not saying tell me right now, but this is the question. Like, what is the next threshold? And for me, we've been thinking like corporation, incorporating, doing a partnership, like having an actual through the state connected, like just you and me
It's
kind
not.
of thing.
It's not a thing.
And
It's not going to be a thing. The next level, the next stage is people picking up the baton only. It's not going to be
including
in the
us.
Sure.
We can keep going.
Yeah, sure.
There are lots
Into
of
our
layers
70s.
Lots of layers to go through.
Right into our 70s. Till we all
No, that's the key though,
die.
so that every author and writer, all their ideas only become relevant once they're dead.
Sure.
Fuck that. Wait, the camera isn't recording. So
Fuck that.
come back, camera. Oh, yeah, there you go. Fuck that. That's our thumbnail right there. Just two middle
Fuck
fingers.
that.
Fuck that.
That's the title.
Yeah, it's like.
Not this. This is where we want to go.
No, that's.
This is the one we want to be in.
But I'm gonna highlight over it with darkened ink.
I think
and with
this-
the middle fingers, and that'll be the thumbnail.
Okay.
I'll just say fuck that. You won't see most of this. That's hands and fingers.
Right. I think this picture actually is necessary to see, in that there is still reward, there's still punishment, there's still entropy, there's still.
So isn't that interesting topic? Reward and punishment in the context of like a cult, quote unquote. To give
The difference that this picture is making is that the reward and punishment disposition, if you will, from nature itself isn't very discriminant. What it's saying in this picture is that everybody's getting dished out just about the same, and not from anybody's decisions particularly, but
Right.
from the entropy of all things at once.
So you're talking about a model being utilized which is normalized towards its minimum of expression. Like,
Right.
No,
Right. None of the built up bullshit on top of the dream. Like,
Right.
none of the dream. The dream. See, the dream as a problem is really making one thing problematic. And if when you take this picture and try to see it through this lens, right?
right.
What happens is
And this
that
is
the reward and
co-
punishment
this
is no
the
longer
dawn of
horizontal.
civilization, right?
It's no longer horizontal. And in this picture, reward and
stack
punishment is offloaded to the system,
Right away.
and then it comes back as
So the walled city,
consequences.
the first step of this, like I just kind of want to.
And this is control right there.
I
If
wanna
you wanted to
connect
talk
that.
about it,
Um,
the concept of control comes from this. The top ego controls the
Right,
ego
right.
below. The ego below controls.
I just think
through
like
reward and punishment.
a little treat, I guess, which we don't experience here easily, is that many dev meetings ago we talked in detail about like how that connects and how that works and how it starts, the commodification process starting with the archetype itself, the very ability of the mind to casually break away and disconnect from that feedback loop and take in certain things as, okay, I'm in this walled city.
With time delay.
Because I am living in this walled city and the leader says this is the law, quote unquote, and this is this. First off, the wall itself provides the initial metaphor for this whole system, which is that
Disconnection.
I can be inside and I know what can be outside. And beyond that, every single thing is described in those terms. A disconnection. Fundamentally taking advantage of the yin-yang, like, God, dualism, unity distinction is being exploited here by, initially, by the cognitive discrepancy route to come into civilization, the breakaway civilization, to start with the very first commodifications of the archetype of the ability
land.
to think like this is the archetype of the system.
Mm-hmm.
That's what starts off the walled city, that one can be inside the wall and outside the wall.
Yep.
This part and parcel, that's the first fucking step.
And outside the wall, we're all effectively equal and vulnerable. And inside the
diverse. We're so diverse outside the wall.
And inside the wall, we're stacked up with protection coming up from the top. And should you fail that system, same protection will turn around on you and imprison you and all those wonderful things.
As if you never knew any of your so-called peers.
Or enslave you.
Well, peers are good, though. Like in case of like a trial, a jury of your peers, maybe people are still can feel empathy towards you in a trial.
So just imagine being here, and your peers are up here. What will happen?
Well, it'll automatically look bad to most of them. They'll push you down further.
Is this ego ever going to reason on an equal footing like this?
Not in those.
Not in that circumstance. That's
context.
the point. That is the danger. That is
right.
the fucked up part. We lose this. We
right.
lose this ability, and then we try to take this. Then we try to take this and talk about equality. We try to take this. And then try to utilize this as a template for formulating a gender equality, race equality, any kind of equality
right.
whatsoever, when it's clear that the stacking up does not allow for any kind of equality to begin with. Doesn't matter which.
Fundamentally, correct.
Like, you can find yourself at the bottom of any stack, and you can find yourself at the top of any stack based on arbitrary traits.
This is the moment analogy here again. Because
that's a dream.
There's the question of how are you going to perceive this?
Well, this can only be perceived through the dream, because the stack only exists in the dream. Where else does the stack exist? Because it doesn't float in the air. It doesn't. It's in the signed documents. It's in the.
Yeah. It's weird to try and perceive it and see it right in the moment.
Well, you can't see it in the moment, and this is the genius of the system and how it hides. It's not a thing.
Right. So
it isn't a thing.
By definition, coming back to this meditation, like you and me, are we having this ego interaction right now?
We are, but we're also in the process of recognizing that interaction.
There's a complete multitude.
We are subject to
ego and not.
We are subject to ignoring other nuances, though. So we're driven by this presentation, and because of that,
we're live streaming and all that, right? Presenting, and trying to roll with certain narratives and create whole arguments and like interesting content.
I don't know if arguments is the right way to go about it.
I'm
not arguing anybody.
No, we actually don't argue, do we?
No, I'm not.
Yes,
this is not.
We do argue actually.
All the time, but not over the subject.
You dismantled it.
What I'm trying to say is, though, this structuring up the way it happens,
Mm-hmm.
if we
It's
were
very
to
apparent.
if we were to take this as the gospel truth to be the case,
But it is if you...
it really illuminates why you cannot resolve any of these problems through it at all. Like, what it causes cannot be resolved through
Right.
ignoring it in another unrelated narrative.
speaking
it
about-
has to be illuminated.
Speaking about faith, if you take this as a model and try to apply it to, is this how you are engaging with reality, quote unquote?
That's
if
its
you take
truth
it,
value.
If you take this sheet on faith, that this is modeling something that you can experience, then if you do experience it while trying to implement this model on faith, it will be very fucking profound
and true.
and you will see what we're talking about.
And if you don't experience this, then it's clear that we're just charlatans full of shit. Which
Well-
is the exact distinction for the charlatan I
And you will
actually
be-
want to make.
And you will be so certain that that's the truth that nothing else will cross your mind.
Well,
And that's a
this
prediction.
and this is the point of faith.
I'm having it up.
Faith is never meant to be as the ground.
Right.
Faith is the stepping stone
so-
to conviction.
Wait, doesn't everybody ask for permission to be trusted? No matter what your presentation is, anybody who's telling you something, they are in some way or another implying that you trust them, what they're saying. They're asking for permission.
Please take me on faith
Right.
for at least a moment.
If there is something, something like, because we as humans can communicate very complex ideas and abstractions and thoughts.
Another charlatan distinction moment would be, take me on faith for the moment versus take me on faith. Period.
For the moment, yes.
For the
Right.
moment versus take me on faith. Period.
Right.
Because what does that mean to take somebody on faith for the moment? It means suspension of disbelief.
For
It is
just a second.
It is a literal device. Why do I keep nagging on being illiterate?
This is a
Because-
topic of recent inquiry.
But
Literalism.
Illiteralism is the inability to take
Illiteralism.
is to basically.
That you just combine the two. Okay,
It's great.
It's no longer we have to distinguish. Illiteralism.
Illiteralism is essentially the inability to suspend one's own disbelief, to listen to a metaphor, and to only be to interpret things like metaphors as unreal things.
And it's not like we're all sitting here, oh, I believe so hardcore everything that I've allowed me to hear.
That
Just because I
again,
opened my ears and
that would
like
be
allowed someone to tell
extremely
me
illiterate.
that
Because-
now that's what I believe because I've let it. It's like CNN, okay?
Superstition right there.
Let's say CNN dies the next day, and then you're like, okay, I believe this guy now,
Well,
and you're literally literalism, literalizing the words right into your belief.
what is superstition if not taking words for reality? So the representation
Yeah, we
of
talked
reality
so much about that the last
to
couple
be
meetings.
reality.
Bravo.
This is what you're describing
It was
being
great.
superstitious.
It was good. Superstition, yep.
You're like, oh, these words are that? Oh, okay. Then I therefore change all of my beliefs.
Right,
basically.
right.
That is an entirely superstitious result.
And so,
It ignores metaphor. It ignores.
so superstitious.
Not that metaphor is the binding of everything, but like you.
So it's what you're doing.
It's one
with
extreme
that.
versus another.
What are you doing with that superstition? You're allowing some words to just wash over you and control your
to allow
your
the
being,
words to be the real things.
juxtaposed with hyperstition, where you are understanding in a loop that these words coming down at me are to be manipulated, and it's an object ongoing.
And ongoing creation.
Right? Not taken as literally that, right? Like
Right.
the illiteralism.
So it's like taking the story to be as is, or taking the story to be ongoing.
With a hyperstation, you know that it's ongoing. It's not a thing that acts on you. It's a thing that's a part of your action ongoing.
It acts on you, and you act on it, and it acts on you, and you act on it. It
Right.
does act on you, because that's where the source of meaning is. Because your actions, for your actions to be fruitful, they have to have a meaning. To
Right. And
purpose
where's the
them
meaning
towards
derived?
somewhere. Where is that coming
Where is
from?
the
The
meaning derived?
narrative. The purpose of an act is a narrative.
Right.
But is
And
that
how is that narrative constructed?
Exactly. The origin of that
Mhm.
narrative, the fundamental reason for the soundbite, is it arbitrarily
That's a lot
coming
of
from a sold commodity, or is it a narrative coming in from all the layers of nature, all the way from the molecular
Okay.
construct to
Now,
the cellular, to the to the neural, to
My argument.
to the cognitive,
My argument here.
all the way through.
Here would be, once you see this once, you can't unsee it.
That's the stream entry situation.
Yeah. To be able to model that.
And this is the membership situation.
Mm-hmm.
So the seeing cannot unsee. That seeing constitutes the phenomena of coherence, of membership, and all of a sudden, with that
Mhm.
realization, this is why I was saying it's a set of realizations. With that realization, you realize that there are only other members and non-members, or you. No, sorry, it's
Realize.
you see everybody on the spectrum of coherence, right? From hostility all the way up through to mastery. You start to engage with everything holistically as part of one definition of coherence, and that is the point.
Mhm.
So that's the click, that's the switch, that's the
Okay. I appreciate that, because that puts everybody under a category of quote-unquote otherness, which is fundamentally along a scale of that which we identify with.
But also
being
altruism.
At one kind of
it's
point.
it's an entirely altruistic perspective now.
One and all points, because we all come and go up and down in different contexts and situations.
And so in this case we call this altruism, and this is where other systems will fail by saying this is the source, that we're all one object. God damn it. No.
So at the top, breaking that loop reconnection back with the whole context of the bottom by actually looking at the whole and the people and the beings, not just having this abstract idea of whole and oneness,
Mhm.
which doesn't include literally your whole context and everything around you.
Mhm. Which is why you don't want to stop there.
Somehow it gets shunted off.
You don't want to stop there, and this is my whole point about those
Right. It's
different
that's.
approaches.
I mean, that's a trap.
yes,
It's a big trap.
yes,
yeah.
and I can't stress enough that it is the worst trap, because this is the last step on which the system hangs itself. It allows it to perpetuate, because even these grand realizations don't necessarily drive you through the
Mhm.
fullness of it.
It's because the book, the word, the scripture, the text, the scriptures, pointing to some concept which reifies itself ultimately, which worships itself. The idea comes back only into itself, instead of to the continually releasing back to the context of the self-reference.
Which is ongoing.
Right. It's a shortcut to shortcut off that, which it.
Yeah, in a most subtle way too. It a shortcut in a way that says, I've figured out the ontology. And
But
because I figured out the
this
ontology,
kind of makes me
nobody
think of
can
like
nobody, and it's the same problem with scientism.
people thinking they're God, like, man, be happy and all that, and everybody all on this like different kind of spectrum of figuring life out, all in it together in a society. It's chaotic. People have their different perspectives and all that, and move from one to another. And yes, even like gurus and all this, like projecting certain things, can get completely out of touch in certain ways, based on this hook. Still a hook there.
Well, you notice a pattern here,
and
right?
that's, I think, the Buddhist strength, of course, would be in that kind of final quote unquote unbinding and all that.
You notice something about people who quote unquote unplug. Most people that unplug become these recluses that
and narcissistic too,
and
solipsistic,
and capable of interacting with society any further.
Incapable. Unplugged by what do you mean? What? I don't know.
They disconnect. They disconnect them. No. You were on the right track.
But we got 20 minutes. Just
they disconnect from themselves from the mainstream thought process.
Right.
But they're unable to talk to individuals in that thought process anymore. They are unplugged from it, and they become alien.
Right.
They become
Yes.
alien.
Okay.
That's the key.
So yes, you're talking about an extremity, which is not different from being under that kind of totalitarian mass control itself. The opposite of which, to disconnect from individuals who are right in front of you, who happen to be from that totalitarian other now, because you've switched sides.
Mm-hmm.
That other, I now cannot communicate
then,
with them. You no longer have people in front of you.
And what's funny about
And you're
that,
in
you're
your
still
fucking head.
perpetuating the same damn narrative,
Of
because
course.
from the opposing side,
Opposame.
it still validates it as
Opposame.
being an
Yeah,
ongoing the reality.
Yeah. So this is the ultimate that I would say for the SOTS thing, and why I was banned from SOTS and all that. An understanding of this is what will give you an understanding of the history of my being banned.
Well, I think you need to qualify that a bit more, because I'm actually not following you.
Just
I'm close to, but
the idea of opposames and appearing to take one side or another, and kind of like, as we had mentioned before, my troll behavior-ish, of not being afraid at all, actually almost sadistically enjoying the
yeah, you were.
People there.
Geiger fed you so much.
Just how people get. But I keep learning, and to me this is a fast track, and it's a sincere way that I try to learn, but I fast track through conflict and all that, like, just to try and figure out how things work.
You know what? It is also a cognitive mistake from the other side to expect you to be yet one more cog in the same self system that, has to restrict itself one way or the other, or a third way. And basically, every human being finds themselves detached from anything they actually try to do.
Well, I think as long as you're not, like, disturbing, chat.
Well, yeah, like you're...
or what's the definition of disturbing?
As the resident Jew, I am not that afraid of your Nazism. So
you, by miracle, managed to get unbanned, and your strategy for, like, half a year was to not say a single word in that whole chat room, but everybody knew you were there still. And then you slowly started talking again. Like, that's how you came back into it.
And not
now,
only that.
Now I'm
that,
not there because I'm banned.
Not only that.
I
kept my head low still. Like, I still keep my head low. And all I do now is basically...
you did interject for me when my topic of me came
yeah, I'm your friend.
Of, like...
I'm your friend. I am not going to have you misrepresent.
And Geiger's like, I drifted towards, like, the right Trump Q.
And the person that was asking this
camp.
did not know the details, so I set the record straight. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the outcome of which is apparently I need to be your advocate now. Because now,
like, as if you are the one who's able to speak coherently and in a manner that people enjoy and love to hear, like tickling their ears.
Did you know that this is all me doing marketing? Because this is all me doing marketing. It's called learning on the job. And
Yeah.
this is how marketing works.
Called
I say
screwing
things.
up.
No. You say things that are pleasing to the ear,
Yeah.
and you keep going. What the problem is with that is that it is completely dishonest, and it betrays absolutely everything that is human. So, I mean,
Well,
you can take that enjoyment of the way I said things about him with a grain of salt.
yeah.
Like I absolutely despise the fact that it happened that way. Just saying.
Yeah, ultimately, I think like chat room as a shared medium needs to have, uh,
Exclusion
you
cannot
know,
be its basis.
certain standards. Like, you can't just not like this person. Like, there has to be better like.
That's why coherence is such the
So
is the tech.
I posted this. My last act on SOTS was to post that comic about Trump
What did
in
you say?
his
What was
crowd, and Trump, from Trump's mouth, it's like a comic. He says Soros from out of his
Oh.
mouth, Trump.
Who's Soros again?
And then the next frame is some chick like raising her like titties out because Trump said the word Soros. Because that was like
Who's
the
Soros
thing.
again?
Uh,
That's like a
some-
bad name, isn't it?
You know, like the Koch brothers.
The who?
KOCH. It's like there's some
Oh, yes, Koch.
American capitalists that
Yeah,
they fuck everything up. Well, you're allowed to bash them as much as you want, but there's other people who you can't bash.
Why? I vaguely remember.
Not sure yet.
dynamics.
Wait, I just I just unmuted.
Sorry.
So we have to start all over again.
Yep.
Because you were saying stuff. And I was just saying, like, what haven't we said yet? What haven't we talked about? And then you were saying, like, oh, guild dynamics, the actual operation of it. And it makes me think about, like, it's the seed that's planted into the ontological matrix.
Yep.
What is this wedge driving forward through the matrix?
Right. So, guild dynamics, we're metaphorically speaking about it as like a seed of the model being implanted into the ontological matrix of the ego stack, built of reality. And what does that look like? We've covered the fact that it behaves like a shelter and it looks to other agents as another agency, so it hides in plain sight, if you will. What we haven't really covered is its internal mechanisms that separate it as a different working framework than the ongoing ontology that we all know and love to hate. Capitalism, socialism, whatever the fuck you have.
Yep.
Whatever.
So I just wanted to note quickly that Vicky mentioned something about which cooler response to Eon, probably from earlier today. So we're gonna do probably like an after session, let's say, but due to the time limitations, we've got about 5 minutes left on this, like until it's 4-hour recording. So this is the 4-hour mark, in other words, which is like, by standard we try to keep it there. And that's why I brought up the question, what didn't we say yet? What didn't we talk about?
So guild dynamics is the main subject.
This that we're going to get into more.
I want to get into guild dynamics personally.
And I wanted personally to link education guild to faith.
That can be done.
Bind that very tight.
That can be done in the same conversation.
Yeah, because that to me is like a 1-1.
Well,
1-to-1
faith is part of that seed to begin with, right? So we need to.
So as we were talking, even faith in yourself, faith in your own ability to analogize. Oh, I've played pool before. I know how to play golf. So I'm gonna. Here's education.
So
happening.
no, more technical, way more technical. Faith is the bootstrap about giving the moment space, then taking the moment as another object on faith, then looking at that moment. That's what we're doing already, seeding. And by the seed, I mean is that
you don't hold on to the original soundbite.
You recognize other members as those who have taken that soundbite on faith. So you're already seeing it in other people, either intuitively or explicitly.
Right. It works as an explanation of what you're seeing.
Right.
In others. Yeah.
And so with that you have membership, and with that you have what's mediated and networked, and because of that you already have guild dynamics in place.
Okay.
And all that's remaining to do is describe the place of education in that framework.
Good job.
So it's done.
We've
done.
connected the self-reference protocols, the self-reference, to this outward social system.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Right. Your self-evident faith is reflected in others, and that causes a perception of members. The perception of members causes a perception of mediation and network.
Right. And this is happening internally before externally. Like you're seeing it in anything in yourself before you ever see it out there.
And this is why it's so tied to the domain of progress, because the domain of progress comes from the awareness that there is something to the insight that you're not alone in this awareness.
Right.
And that constitutes the membership itself, which constitutes networking because of that recognition, which constitutes the mediation of that networking.
That it's a worthwhile activity to contact others and find the others.
And mediate that activity in a specific sense.
So that's guild networking.
It's immediate. It's all like it's a seed.
We need to get into that because this is how how what we've been describing today, these shelled networks
Amount
of guild
to
activity actually function.
amount to
Well, not yeah, it's a okay, good illustrative, but
this is like the
So,
cross section of what's
amount-
happening inside
amount
the
to
corporation.
a society ongoing.
Yeah, so this is the kind of tiny bubble that starts to nucleate inside from the seed, and it grows into
Like within this box, but
and then spreads.
so these are local loopbacks, part of other networks.
Yeah, this goes on indefinitely.
These are like let's say different markets, but also this connection through the polymorphic machine, which is
which reconnects the obfuscated
within
marketplace
this box.
within itself. Yeah.
Yep. So what we at? Yep. We're pretty much
done. We're in the done phase.
We're at the done. So
Oh, yeah, I guess this box could constitute the shelter that
Put
institute
right at the very top. Shelter. There you go.
of the guild.
Shelter of the Guild. Is that going to be the title of this?
No. No,
Ideas for
it's
titles?
just the idea of
We actually have, like, 2
the
minutes
box
left,
means. The box is just like surrounding the corporate entity itself.
I noticed I drew these other connections just flying outside the box.
So all the interactions beyond the box are trade guild, which are monetary, but internally to the box it's demand and supply.
Right. Right.
Is the
Right.
gist.
And so this is kind of like our idea of a model of how people would interact with to effectively create the guild, to this to rise up this kind of hidden network. I don't know,
I think
what is it?
I think it comes down to also being able to interpret this diagram. You will have to notice
Like,
that this box appears
so this-
inside all circles.
This is an allowance or an allowing of nature kind of itself, let's say, to the context of the body to bubble up and try to capture that as your demand.
Outside of pure abstract thought.
Right. So that's a major difference of what we're doing here
Versus what's being done all the time.
Yeah, we're just trying to highlight that. Anyways, yeah, I think that's it. So, good times, good job. We are very success.